Good evening, everyone. I will call the Burnsville City Council work session to order. And we'll go around the table because we have some guests in the audience that I think our residents would like to know who's around the table and who's in the audience. Elizabeth Couts, Mayor of Burnsville.
Michelle Collins, City Clerk.
Dan Gustafson, City Council.
Vince Workman, City Council.
Ryan Peterson, Public Works Director.
Jen Desrud, City Engineer.
Chris Cromie with Bolton and Mink.
Molly Klein with MnDOT.
Greg Lindberg, Deputy City Manager.
Melanie Lee, City Manager.
Kara Schultz, City Council.
And we'll go to you.
Joe Moore, Dakota County Transportation.
Yeah, welcome.
Tom Boland, Dakota County Transportation.
Welcome.
Doug Berry, Dakota County Transportation.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome.
Regina Dean, City of Burnsville.
Okay.
I'm David Alvane, also with MnDOT.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thank you. And at our work sessions, we go directly to our agenda. And the first item is the MnDOT Highway 13 corridor study. And I'm going to go to our city engineer, Jen Desrud, to make the introductions of our consultants who are reporting on this.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. So tonight we have a representative from MnDOT, Molly Klein, and their consulting engineer, Chris Cromie, to talk about the Trunk Highway 13 corridor study that they have been working on for a few months.
Okay, very good. Welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. I'm Molly Klein. I'm a South Area Engineer at MnDOT. And tonight we'd just like to share some information about the Highway 13 study that we're currently working on. And Chris Cromie will get you into all of the details here tonight.
As Molly mentioned, my name is Chris Cromie with Bolton and Mink, and I'm the project manager for the corridor study. It's a collaborative effort with MnDOT, the City of Burnsville, City of Savage, Dakota County, and Scott County, as well as FHWA. I would give you a brief overview of the study area that we're looking at. We are studying Highway 13, beginning at Nicollet Avenue all the way over to Highway 169. And as you know, that corridor has multiple personalities as you drive through there, with various improvements that have happened over the years. And the intent of the study is to develop an overall vision. What does this corridor ultimately want to be or need to be to serve the modes of traffic through the corridor? So it is a 2-year study, but much of the work is going to be happening as far as the visioning is going to be happening in year 1. Partially because there's a project that is already funded in the city of Savage, at the ports of Savage, to make improvements to the freight operations along Highway 13. That project is currently funded for construction in 2022, so just 2 years out. So some of the needs of the corridor, I know I'm preaching to the choir on this, but Highway 13 regularly on a daily basis operates over its operating capacity. There's congestion along the corridor. Several of the intersections along Highway 13 have high crash rates, so there's a safety concern in the corridor as well. And then the truck movements that are occurring through the corridor. There are multiple large trucks that move through on a daily basis, and there are safety concerns both for the trucks and for other modes of transportation. And then the pedestrian, bicycles, and transit in the corridor all exist in pieces, and so the intent is to make them part of the vision for the corridor as well. So I'm going to touch on a little bit of the congestion issues. The map that's on the screen here illustrates what happens during the morning commute. All the shaded area indicates areas of congestion. The red shading indicates areas that there's more than 2 hours of congestion on a regular basis. You can see that much of the congestion is at the signalized intersections, as you would expect, where we see queues as long as a quarter to a half a mile on a regular basis. We are studying both the effects of the Interstate 35W interchange and the 169 interchange and the congestion that causes. We don't anticipate the study to go beyond Highway 13, though. There are other things happening on 169 and Interstate 35 that will address those congestion issues. In the afternoon, you can see there's more red in the corridor. Again, mainly at the signalized intersections where those queues are backing up more than a quarter mile, and delays can get up over 3 to 4 minutes at a particular signalized intersection. I mentioned the freight movement through the corridor. This is a very important freight corridor. The purple on the map here indicate destinations or trip origins or destinations for large trucks and other freight movements. Freight accounts for 8% of the daily traffic on Highway 13, so it is a substantial portion of the traffic. Most corridors we see in the 3 to 4% range for freight movement. Many of these locations don't have alternative access. There isn't a local street connection to them. Their access is directly off of Highway 13, so maintaining movements to them are going to be important. Inherently, these are heavy, big trucks. They have different physical characteristics than cars. They accelerate and decelerate much slower in many cases, which can lead to the congestion issues on Highway 13. And then last but not least, there were more than 30 crashes recorded in the 5-year period that we looked at that involved heavy trucks. And many of those 30 crashes resulted in serious injury crashes because of the physical characteristics of those vehicles. So we know Highway 13 is important for freight. It's important for the local economy and what's happening, the jobs that it creates here, but it's also statewide. The movements of freight come through here from all over the state of Minnesota. Some of the safety issues that we're seeing at intersections, currently there are 6 intersections that have above the average crash rates that we would expect for that type of an intersection and the volume of traffic at that intersection. And 50% of the crashes throughout the whole corridor are rear-end crashes that are generally attributed to congested, signalized intersections.
Can you talk a little bit more, because it's the purple area that's really a lot of crashes? Between Nicollet and 35W. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Is that both morning and evening?
That's well, we look at crashes throughout the day, so it's not just a AM or PM thing. But we highlighted that segment between the 35W interchange and Nicollet because that segment itself has more crashes than we would expect for a 4-lane expressway. Above the statewide average for a facility like that. And it's likely due to driver expectation coming from a system-to-system type interchange into a signalized condition. It's also a highly congested area, so there are many crashes attributed to the congestion in that particular area.
Well, MBTA is there, so lots of buses. A lot of
buses,
transit.
Lots of traffic turning at Nicollet, entering and exiting the freeway at higher speeds than maybe what's expected on Highway 13. A lot of weaving in between Nicollet and 35 and Nicollet.
Okay.
And goes without saying, but feel free to interrupt me as I go here if you have questions. In many ways, the transportation issues in the corridor are much easier than some of the sensitive issues that we need to work through. There's a reason that Highway 13 is the way it is, and a lot of that has to do with the natural features. Of course, we have the Minnesota River to the north and the floodplain associated with the Minnesota River. In Savage, we have the Savage Fen. Which basically precludes any development in and around that region. So between Quinton Avenue and Highway 13 to the south, there's really no local roadway system. And then we have the Rudy Kramer Nature Preserve here in Burnsville, as well as the Sue Fisher Memorial Park, all adjacent to Highway 13. So much of the local roadway system supporting Highway 13 is in the form of frontage roads or local streets. So as we look at access conditions on Highway 13, we also have to look at how does that work with the local roadway system, the county and city streets providing access to properties. So I'm going to zoom into a couple of our focus areas in the study corridor, and I'll kind of zip through the Savage ones a little bit, but I do want to touch on the ports of Savage. There are 3 ports that are in operations there. The primary access points for those ports are directly off of Highway 13 at Dakota Avenue, Yosemite Avenue, and Lynn Avenue. And none of the 3 ports are connected to any other public street. As you probably know, if you travel this corridor, there's some seasonal fluctuation in the trucks, but when corn prices are high, there are trucks parked out on that roadway. Trucks can not only can they get into the port, they have a difficult time getting out of the port because of the traffic. So we're studying this area pretty close, and I mentioned this is the region, Dakota Yosemite, that currently has some dollars allocated for a project in 2022. Downtown Savage, Savage's downtown and retail district is right along it's a block off of Highway 13. They rely heavily on the Lynn Avenue intersection, as does one of the ports. So we'll be taking a close look at what we can do there to improve mobility on 13 and maintain and enhance access to the downtown area. The downtown area has some more focused bicycle and pedestrian needs. Minnesota Valley Transit does stop 8 times a day in downtown Savage, which inherently creates pedestrians. But there's also school, church, other organizations there and residential there that are generating pedestrian bicycle trips. On the Burnsville side of things, kind of skipped over the Chowan-Washburn area, but we will be looking at the Chowan-Washburn area and how that works for the businesses in Burnsville, but also provides some connectivity back into the Savage downtown area. And then another key location that we are looking at is the Nicollet Avenue area and some of the development that has occurred here in Burnsville over the last 20 years with the heart of the city, the higher density residential, transit-oriented development, the transit station on the north side, a lot of the houses and retail on the south side, and then, of course, the introduction of the Orange Line station as well. So we will be studying that Nicollet intersection closely. There's a lot of different demands on that intersection. And as we unplug the drain to the west with traffic, this has the potential of being, one of the only signals coming from the west on Highway 13. So we need to make sure that we understand the downstream effects of some of the things we do at Washburn and Lynn and Quinton. Mentioned the transit in Savage. Similarly, there's transit stops throughout the heart of the city, local transit, and then the connection to the transit station at Nicollet and Highway 13. So we will be looking at how we can better connect those things. I know there's been a desire or a need for some sort of pedestrian grade separation connecting those two. That'll be part of our evaluation, as well as the vehicular access in and out of the Nicollet Avenue area. So we're about 4 months into our 2-year study, and we had our first open house meeting last week over in Savage, where we had really good attendance. We had about 70 people there, and a good mix of individuals. We had representatives from the port, some of the local businesses, residents. Some people who have been involved in earlier studies and wants to see things come to fruition. Others who are seeing this for the first time, not realizing that there's a history here in the corridor. Confirmed a lot of the things that we were seeing, confirmed a lot of the issues that were identified in previous studies. We will have a fair amount of public engagement moving forward. We're establishing a business advisory group here in the next few weeks, where we want to give businesses the opportunity to meet early in the morning, talk about their particular needs. We're also going to be set up to do presentations to interested community groups, whether they're businesses or other interests. We can do that. Pop-up meetings where we bring the meetings to where the people are. Farmers market or something to that effect. Grocery stores have been pretty effective for us. I mentioned the schedule. We're in the first part of 2020 here. We hope to work through much of the visioning for the corridor in 2020. Get environmental clearance in 2021, design, and move forward with the improvements at Ports of Savage in 2022. So Burnsville is a important partner in this. As we develop the ultimate vision for the corridor, we're going to be looking for the city to adopt that. So that's why Jen's been actively involved in our project management team meetings, helping to guide the direction of the study. Because ultimately we want both cities, both counties, to adopt a plan that can be supported and then go after funding for improvements.
Okay. Good. So how much funding do we have in place right now, or do we just have funding for the study, Molly?
We have funding for the study and the project at Dakota and Yosemite in the city of Savage.
Okay. But we need to get funding from Burnsville to 169?
We're not looking for funding at this time.
Okay, so 2022 is when you're going to have final designs and advertise for bids for construction. So what's the process there? I mean, because I just saw that the federal government is going on another CR.
So the project in 2022 it will likely just be the improvements at the ports, and there will be other projects identified in our corridor study and the vision that we'll start parsing out and look for other funding at that point. So we'll be talking about funding for improvements, say at Nicollet, Washburn, Chowan, other locations. About a year from now is when we'd start talking about implementation of those things.
Because we've been talking about Nicollet and Chowan for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Molly?
Oh, we have?
So how many more years are we going to talk about Nicollet and Chowan? Because they're in Burnsville, and I'm interested in Burnsville.
Well, one of the charges that MnDOT gave to us was to make this the last study of Highway 13. And we've set this up to study the entire corridor and to do an environmental assessment for the entire corridor. So we can get some environmental clearance for future studies or future projects from Nicollet all the way over to 169.
Because you can go into your historical archive and you can see, I think it goes back to 2005 when we did the Chowan study, or even before that. And we've been talking about Nicollet for such a long time.
I think the goal of this study is, like Chris had said, for this to be the last time we study it. In the past, we've done studies separate from the environmental clearance, which has proven to be challenging. So we study it and we decide what we want, but then when we start the environmental process, we have to start all over and work through it. So the intent of this study is really to look at the full area, get the environmental clearance, and then start with the first project that we have funded, but identify other projects in a sequential order or thresholds which would precipitate a project and allow for the work that we're doing here to be a building block. So we use the information we're gathering now and putting together, and then we could go after funding for additional projects throughout the corridor as time progresses.
So the information you'll have from this study that has to do with the environmental piece is still going to be valid when we move forward? It's not that you have to go back and redo the environmental piece?
That is the intent of this study, and we worked very heavily with the Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, to make sure that the process that we're following will allow that, so we're not starting over.
Because
or
it just
different
seems to me like all of this studies, we study, like the Chowan and the Nicollet, and nothing. So we spent money on the study and nothing. Yes, Vince?
How did the County Road 5 project materialize then? Just
Because we just kept at it, and Scott County was a very good partner. And for that, we worked collaboratively between the two counties. And then it was Scott County who paid for myself and Mayor Williams to go to Washington, I think 2 or 3 times to lobby for funding.
And Congressman Klein, I think.
Yeah,
got us
he
$1
just got
million
he got the 1 million, the first 1 million, and then he was against appropriation.
He was against
Yeah,
pork. Earmarking.
earmarking. Yeah, and so that's why we went. But the thing is, it's the 5 and 13 took about 15 years, and it started with 13 million, and we ended up 43 million. Molly, is that correct?
Sounds right.
That's what happens when you
So
don't do it
the
today.
thing is, the reason why I say this is because it doesn't get better. The cost doesn't come down, it just goes up. And so we've experienced that. And so when I look at this in 2022, you're just going to do Yosemite, Dakota and Yosemite, and then what about Burnsville? When do we start that, Molly? I mean, I know you said you have building blocks, and I won't put you on the spot, but you all need to begin to take a look at that. And you looked at that diagram you put up there. A lot of your crashes are in the Burnsville area, on Nicollet, between Nicollet and 35.
Yeah, the reason it only says Dakota Yosemite is that's because that's the only project that we have committed dollars
That's
for.
funded.
That's funded. And I can say based on our findings and the purpose and need for our study and our environmental document, the Dakota Yosemite is going to be a small chunk of solving the problem. It's going to take, it's going to take a lot of the truck congestion out of it. But as long as we have some of the signalization that we have on the main line of Highway 13, we're going to have congestion, we're going to have crashes. So we can't solve the problems until we start addressing the signals at places like Nicollet and Washburn, Lynn, and Quinton.
Ryan?
Well, this is clearly what we need to do to get this step, so we know exactly what it is we're gonna be going for. But we're gonna have a lot of decisions on what we wanna do for prioritization. You're gonna hear later tonight, County Road 42. The stuff that's gonna come out of this is not gonna be small dollars, and none of the stuff gets done without local dollars at this point.
Well, the
And,
reason why I'm asking is that do we have to make some trips to Washington to
We need
get money?
We need the study to get completed.
Well, I know that.
And then we'll know what we're fighting for, and then we're gonna have to figure out, is 13 gonna be our priority? Is County Road 42 gonna be our priority? I mean, now we're doing Cliff and 35W, that's where we put some capital improvement dollars towards. So we'll have to sit down and do some prioritization. on what our next transportation, if we can do both, awesome, but, I don't know what on interchange these days, I think the locals, if you're lucky, you're only putting in a third of the cost. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast this day and age. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but,
Sounds right.
so, and I'm not saying that, interchange is gonna be what's come out of this, but, will be.
Well, council, what I really would want to see happen here, with Molly and Chris and Melanie, I want to see Nicollet and Chowan on the schedule. We're going to deal with the cost anyway, and however that gets done. And I know we'll be talking about 42 with the county here in the next item, but we've got some big issues.
We can most definitely start bringing that up through capital improvement plan this year. And with this being a 2-year study, it really may make more sense to bring it up more in 2022, as you said. It took us how long to get 513? It's probably gonna take us that 10 years. It's just to secure the type of funding you need, if we're talking, $40 million projects or whatever.
Yeah, it'd
If
be
that's what we're saying. I'm
interesting
not
to
saying
see
that
how
today.
much that's going to cost.
Well,
Yeah, Vince.
with the units being near completion and the TOD and the MBTA implementation, I would think we'd have some other partners at the table too, to maybe expedite some of this stuff.
Yeah,
We're
it
checking a lot of
also
boxes.
gets onto MnDOT's schedule. They have the whole state.
Wasn't Met Council the most powerful unit of government in the state?
No, it's MnDOT. They do roads. You're talking about transit.
MnDOT for roads.
Yeah, this is roads. Yeah. Well, this is very informative, but I think we need to do a lot better. And not spend we spend so much money on studies. And we got to get to building. And I know it all has to do with the amount of money that comes. So everybody get counted, because those are the monies that we get from Washington. So I'm pitching. Everybody get counted for the census. Okay, any other thoughts? Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Molly. Really appreciate it. Look forward to it. The next time you guys come in, I want to see Burnsville on that project list.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item is Dakota County, and this is County Road 42 and the visioning study. Jen, you're going to introduce our guests.
So Mayor and City Council, our second item, Doug Berry from Dakota County is here to talk about the introduction to the study. It hasn't quite gotten underway yet, and so he'll lay out the plan for doing that.
Oh,
Thank you,
goody. And let me tell you how many studies I've gone through for 42. And then the study for 77 for the red line.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Well, I will, maybe I'll start with something I mentioned to Jen as I came in today, that we do have an overlay project that will be under construction next year. It's federally funded from the West County line up to County Highway 11, so it goes through the interchange area, and it covers most of Burnsville. So it's an extensive overlay and ADA reconstruction project, so it will pick
So
up
it
some.
goes from the border of Savage and Burnsville all the way over to 11?
Yes, correct.
Oh,
Most of
nice.
us.
So what, you're charging us, what, 40% or less? Because I think you guys changed that ordinance, if I remember
I'm
correctly.
confident in saying it's less.
Yes.
Yes.
25%.
And in
Yeah,
fact,
yeah.
the federal funding, I'm not sure, Jen, if you know the numbers on that, or,
So it's my understanding that the city would only be paying for anything related to utility improvements and not part of the paving project.
Yeah, because the background says that the county has 85% and we have 15%.
that's correct for principal arterials, yes. But that is for the study, for the 42 study. However,
But that's, what's with,
this overlay project that I mentioned, which is a bit of a sidebar, I have to admit, is a primarily federally funded project.
Right, so not much at all in Burnsville participation is needed.
oh, excellent.
Good news, thank you.
Great.
Get some of that Fed money back.
Yeah, yeah. Good. Well, thank you, Doug.
Okay. And then there's the matter of the study. So
Okay.
I will proceed with that. The study will actually address 3 cities. So it begins at the West County border with Savage, and then proceeds through Apple Valley and into Rosemount out to Highway 52. So it really covers the most heavily traveled parts of Highway 42, and it really is a look after about 20 years at this corridor once again. So the last time this was done, it was concluded around the year 2000, 1999, 2000. So it was a look ahead to 2020, and here we are. We actually have volumes now that are quite a bit lower than the volumes that were forecast 20 years ago, which is kind of good news. And then also there's always a number of projects that are being programmed and looked at for 42. So it's an ongoing project. There's continual maintenance of this corridor, of course. So
Yeah, and in 1999, we invested a lot of money to get the streets on the outside of 42 to take traffic off of 42. So we have Corporate Drive.
Yeah, Corporate Center Drive.
Yeah, Corporate Center Drive from Savage all to the
943.
shopping center, and then on the south side, we had Preserve that went through Savage and out to the Parkway, right?
West Preserve's on the north side, but yeah,
Yeah.
kind of Corporate Center Drive on
Yeah.
the south, yep.
yes, that's correct. There were several projects that were implemented, or several
We
elements.
tried to help to alleviate some of that congestion.
Yeah, that was at the west end of the corridor that will now be looking at. Looking at this current slide, again, it's a long-range plan for 42. It's revisiting it after 20 years. We'll be working closely with the communities. I'll talk a little later about public engagement aspects of this work. We're looking at all modes. So one of the changes in terms of how we look at a corridor like this now is to be more responsive to looking at pedestrian and bicycle issues. And I'll make a few more remarks about that when we look at some Burnsville-specific issues. Our intent is to limit roadway expansion. I'm not going to suggest that we won't be looking at new capacity. However, we understand the challenges of expanding Highway 42, and so we'll be looking at creative ways to manage traffic as part of this study. Looking at the Burnsville issues, just a couple of points on that. Of course, the Center Village redevelopment, and you'll be hearing tonight a little later about the traffic study associated with that. And I've had the opportunity and appreciate the opportunity to have been a part of that team and work with your staff through that. The pedestrian and bicycle issues in this redevelopment area are kind of transcendent for this corridor because you don't really have a lot of that type of function out in the Burnsville Center area right now. So that's kind of an exciting aspect of what's being looked at, is to create some new environments out there as part of that redevelopment. So we'll look at how we can support that as part of this corridor study. The other things that I'd like to highlight, another mode, of course, is transit. So the Orange Line extension, you'll hear about that as well tonight. You have a very full agenda.
Item.
And MBTA issues. There is one route, one MBTA route, the 444, that has fixed stops on 42. So there's a handful of marked fixed stops on Highway 42. And so we'll look at that. We'll be looking at the long-term view in terms of MBTA's input, Metro Transit, how transit can also function along this corridor. So there are some exciting opportunities, we think, to take a look at that, and some real good opportunities. The other thing that might be promising is technology. So the use of intelligent transportation systems, that's touched on as part of the village traffic study, and we'll continue to outline some ideas on that as part of this. There are challenges with just simply how people utilize lanes in the high capacity parts of Highway 42. So there could be opportunities to make traffic work better through technology in the future on a number of fronts. Don't want to forget the other communities. I'm here with Burnsville, but just briefly, as we go through this study, that will be part of the dynamic. We'll be having the three cities together talking about these issues. In Apple Valley, a continued look at intersection signals. We get into some more residential type settings there that will be challenging. Some of those are in Burnsville as well. So I've got that on the slide, Burnsville and Apple Valley neighborhoods where the two communities meet. In Rosemount, new development is really the theme out there. There are some challenging infrastructure issues. There's a crossing of a railroad. And we're working already with Dakota County Technical College on a signal at one intersection out there. So one thing we're interested in doing as part of this is to not dismiss the possibility of just advancing projects as we do the study. So this signal is an example of that. It's something that needs to be done, and we're just moving forward with that project. It'll be constructed next year. And public involvement. This is a long corridor, 15 miles, 3 communities, 3 cities. We're just beginning to outline these strategies around this, but we're very happy to be working with a team. We've selected a consultant, SEH. They'll be working with us on this. One of the things that stood out in their proposal was that they identified some specific opportunities to be where people are already going to be present. So pop-up meetings where there are community events and opportunities to engage with people and let them know what will be happening with this study. So we're just outlining those ideas right now. We'll be talking with your staff later this month about how we're planning for those types of things at the outset of the study. We're just getting started. About a year and a half of study here. So before the end of next year, we'll be concluding this. And you can see on the slide just a simple outline of the process. So the first thing is to make sure we understand the communities and that we're looking at priorities. Then we establish broad visions. As we conclude this study, the main outcome will be to identify projects that can be pursued for funding and construction, design, and be selective and prioritize. So I think for each of the 3 cities, that will be a great opportunity to focus. We know we have to understand that we can't do everything at once, but we certainly can plan for those top priorities and then move forward. Where we are right now, this is the last slide. Everything's been moved forward through the county process. We're completing the joint powers agreements with the cities. That's in process right now. The study will kick off later this month officially with our project management team. We'll assemble a study advisory committee, and we're looking at specific individuals for that right now. And then, of course, we have a lot of technical work to take a look at forecasts. And I kind of mentioned from the outset, I'll circle back to it. The good news is that traffic has grown less than had been forecast in the past. We are completing a major cycle of traffic forecasting in Dakota County right now, and there's growth. There's no question that we've got more traffic, but the numbers aren't as frightening as they once were, perhaps. So there's still a challenge, and I'm confident that we can figure out how to manage those numbers.
Okay.
I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Yes, Vince?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Can you tell me more about the map that was attached in our background and what the source of that was?
Yeah,
It's the SEH map with all
Oh,
the
sure.
issues.
Yes. That map is from the proposal that SEH submitted, and it is a summary of issues. It's that firm's understanding of the corridor in very broad strokes is what you're seeing there.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
There's-
Yes,
That map references 2040. Is this the one that you're
yeah,
referring
the
to?
daily traffic, yes.
Yeah.
It's referencing.
On the
2040, which is
retail
coming out of
residential.
our 2040 comp plans, I would assume.
Yes.
Or you're on the county's forecast for the traffic.
Yes, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm assuming you're referring to maybe some forecast values for traffic.
Yep.
Yeah. So we provided those to consultants who proposed on the project, and so they're bringing that back in their proposal as something to look at.
Yeah, because what you're looking at on the 2040 in the Burnsville area, it looks at is that what you're looking at, Dan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the Burnsville area in the 2040 plan, and it's 59,000 vehicles.
Yes.
Through the retail corridor.
Yeah, you've got volumes that are approaching 50,000 today.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that the forecasts approach 60,000 in the highest segments, and that's certainly a jump. But again, it's not as high as one might have thought. I've been doing this long enough that I can remember 20 years ago that we were looking at some very robust numbers for growth of the Twin Cities Metro.
It looks like SEH did a lot of their due diligence in really looking at the cities throughout their comp plan and how each of these areas are impacted.
Yes, I think it reflects well on them in their proposal. Clearly, they were selected for the study, and there was a broad agreement that they scored well in the minds of those on the selection committee. So that was a good outcome, and we've just started working with their team in detail. And again, that's right from the proposal, so it's just the beginning. It's their first impressions.
Okay, Kara?
Forgive me if I missed this in there, but how is this study tying into what we're looking at for possibly altering on and off ramps for 35?
Yeah.
The study that will be presented of the Burnsville Center Village redevelopment and the traffic study associated with it. That study concluded with some mitigations. That's kind of the broad term for traffic, and those ideas represent some capacity needs, some movements that can provide some benefit, and it looks at making the east side ready for redevelopment as well. So there are some exciting ideas in there. As we go through this corridor study, we will look at some additional ideas. The study will recognize that projects need to be developed through a process of looking at many alternatives. And so there is, at this point, a wide range of possible solutions, and we are definitely starting with that study as an informative backdrop for how we would begin this work.
Yeah, good. Kira, it's good that you remembered that piece.
Because I would like to make it clear that council has not decided what options we're going to do, if any.
Yeah.
And while we have the vision of that drawn up as a possibility, A, we don't own the property, and B, we as a council have not allocated to move forward on that. So I throw out that caution.
On the McAndrews?
On that.
Yeah, on the
So
McAndrews idea.
That's a big caution in that whole area, that it may be wishes and dreams right now, but we have not moved forward on that. So I do caution on that, and I do caution especially on those ramps.
So,
Jen.
Mayor and Council, maybe a spoiler, but we are not proceeding with the McAndrews ramps based on your feedback from.
Very good.
Thank you.
So,
Okay, very good.
That's in a couple
I think
items
you
from
all
now.
heard that all of us had, ooh.
That got decided the last time we
Yeah.
talked about it.
Ooh.
That is helpful.
The
Yeah,
study
that's
that
good. Thank
we
you,
are
Jen.
working on to complete, Doug has been part of that, and we're going to present concepts that mitigate, and then all of those ideas do need to be further studied, further vetted. It'll give you high-level cost estimates of what it will take to get there in item number 4. But Doug and the county have been part of that, and will be part of their studies. It'll go in hand in hand.
Excellent. I like hearing that, and I'm glad, Kara, that you remembered that issue, because all of us were not really in favor of the McAndrews ramps.
We heard it.
So you've got some ideas for all of that to take place on the County Road 42 corridor and not impact any of our residential area that
Yes.
isn't impacted at
Yes,
this point.
Madam Mayor, all members of the council, we are excited with the outcomes of that study, and we discussed at a staff level that not including the ramps at McAndrews was kind of the baseline for how to proceed with a mitigation package. So I was talking very general terms before about what that mitigation was, but the recommendations of the study tend to focus on other elements, and there is more capacity needed on 42 in places, so probably not too shocking to hear that. And there are some other great ideas that are reflected in that study. So
Thank you.
we'll be
Thank you.
And
bringing
thank you,
that to our
Jen.
work.
Thank you. Okay, great. Any other questions for Doug? No, thank you so much for coming in and giving us the update on the study and then when you're going to proceed. So you'll be back.
you.
I'm sure
Oh,
Jen will
yes.
have you back.
Yeah, happy to.
Okay, thank you. Okay. The next item is the Dakota County Orange Line Extension presentation. And Regina, I believe you're going to be introducing our guests from the county? Okay.
Good evening,
Good
Mayor,
evening.
members of the council. So today I have Joe Morneau by my side with Dakota County Transportation. He'll go over the presentation with you, but I do want to say this is a study that started in 2017.
Yes.
Dakota County graciously put it on hold so that we could complete our work with the Center Village redevelopment vision. And so they picked it back up, and we're looking at next steps for implementation. So I'll turn it over to Joe now.
And thank you, Joe. And then I'm sure that this is one that Met Council is very much a part of, because they haven't made that decision with regard to that, the County Road 42 Orange Line stop. Okay. Thank you.
And, yep, towards the end, we will have an ask to council for a resolution of support that if you are supportive of
Yeah, and I
next
saw
steps,
that.
then we'll bring forward to a future city council meeting.
Yeah, and then you'll have, well, give your presentation, Joe, and we'll have questions because.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you, Mayor Carlson. Good evening, council members. So, as Regina noted, I'll walk through the process here that we took as well as some of the draft recommendations. But before we talk about another study, I want to talk briefly about Phase 1 Orange Line, which is going on right now in and amongst the 35W work. So that's 12 station pairs, 2 of those, of course, Nicollet Avenue and Burnsville Parkway. And so far, everything is on time and on schedule with the project. So we're still expecting a December 2021 operation startup. So that's looking good. For the extension itself, in the regional plans, Orange Line runs a little further than just Phase 1. It goes down, the corridor goes down to Lakeville. So what we study was a possibility for additional stations, at a minimum 2, but even going a little bit beyond that. So we identified the Burnsville Center Mall area as well as Lakeville around the area of the Kenrick Park and Ride for additional studies. Based on some additional discussions, we looked at the possibility of a few others near CASA 50, 60, 70, as well as near Crystal Lake Road. The study management, we had all the cities involved, so Ryan and Regina put in a lot of work on the technical advisory committee and project management team. We also had City of Lakeville there, of course, MnDOT, Met Council, Metro Transit, and MBTA to provide input on all the technical work and make some study decisions for us. So very briefly, I'll talk through these study components. The first 4 on here were in the whole time, public involvement evaluation for stations, operating and routing needs, and then capital operations costs. Partway into the study, we did add a little bit more of a rigorous process to analyze ridership, given that this is a new corridor for transit service, for all-day transit service, and particularly high level, we needed to have a good idea of how that would perform and when to make the call on the service extension here. So, as Regina noted, we did have a couple of breaks within the study. We actually did about 14 months of work between mid-2017 and late 2019. The last 6 or 7 months or so was focused mainly on that ridership estimation and then some project wrap-up. So the public involvement, we had targeted meetings. We had a lot of focus on those as well as some online engagement. That's proven, this study as well as other county projects to be a little bit more effective in terms of getting feedback, but we also did have some traditional open houses as well. Within Burnsville, we had some outreach at the Burnsville Center Mall, did some on-board with the local routes, as well as a few events like the Fire Muster back in 2017. So talking about the Burnsville Central Station, this was one of the more tricky tasks within the study, given how dynamic the situation is here. There's different needs to address. One is access to a station for both pedestrians as well as transit riders in the local routes and how we accommodate a connection there. Routing and operations in a particularly high traffic area was a concern, figuring out where to route and how to get onto and off of 35W. And then potential changes to the area, of course. The expectation is that the mall will be undergoing some significant changes, as well as areas north of CASA 42. So trying to anticipate that the best we can, provide some flexibility in our recommendations and concepts was key here. And then understanding what service demand would be based on some of those changes to the area and whether we're looking at a more emphasis on residents in the area. Are we going to see the same same amount of employment, or is that going to go up or down? So that's pretty crucial to understanding what the demand will be for service. So what we did, given the uncertainties, we developed a few different concepts for stations. Our general preference, though, was to have a station, if you, on the map there, on the north side to the west side of the mall, so between Dick's Sporting Goods and Macy's, in that general area where you see the parking lot. That would be the best for MBTA riders. That would provide, likely, given future plans, the best connection to the north of CASA 42, if that's, you know, at a at-grade intersection, or if we were looking at something grade separated, as is noted in the plan. So we did develop two general concepts based on a couple possible changes to the interior of the mall property. One is about the one on the left is about 1 acre. This provides ample room for Orange Line operations as well as local operations. And another consideration is, if this is a terminal station, there'll be more facility needs for layover for the drivers at this location. It also allows for a car for people to arrive and depart by car too, and has a separate turnaround lane for those riders. The concept on the right is for a more constrained area. That one on the left is about 1 acre. This one on the right would be about half an acre, and would have a much little bit of a slimmer profile closer to the street, but would still be able to accommodate all those operations for buses, both Orange Line and local. One thing to note here with this station, there's no expectation in the present or future of any express buses. That generates particularly high traffic. We sense that wouldn't be the right fit for the Burnsville for the Center Village vision, and much of the demand for express service can be, you know, facilitated at both Kenrick Avenue Park and Ride and Burnsville Transit Center, and for the foreseeable future.
I know.
Councilmember Keeley.
Well, that comment got my attention because with the redevelopment of Burnsville Center as we see it, there's a significant high density of residential development that's going to go in there, of folks that are quite possibly going to be looking for an express bus into downtown, or either downtown. Today, your statement is absolutely true. I mean, there isn't any really, but I would say that there's far more likely that there will be a lot when that development comes to fruition, and you see multi-level, higher than 4-level probably, mixed-use developments going in where there's currently asphalt, and we're going to see that sort of express bus demand come online. Now, that may be serviced by MBTA as opposed to the Met Council, Metro Transit per se. But this, I think the design, or at least the thought of how this might be designed, I think has to embrace that possibility is very distinct in the future.
Councilmember Keeley, that could bear out to be true. I think some of the questions here, though, too, is with I think just the decisions with allocating between some of the stations, and the other one might be a challenge, and then also the challenge of providing park and ride. If this is, would be a higher level of service, people would look to also access, from a broader area, and that would be a challenge. The one other thing to consider here too is for people walking to the service from the immediate area, this service might be seen as pretty comparable to express service. I don't recall the travel time from this station to downtown, but I know from Burnsville Transit Station, it's going to be about 14 or so minutes longer than express. So it's longer, but it's still reasonable. And it would be every, in the rush hour, every 10 minutes would be about the same as express service.
Yeah.
So
I'm just interested in seeing how the study, as you go along, and really evaluate our plan and how all of that will materialize in terms of what the implementation of that corridor is going to look like. for transit.
We did. I'll get to that in a few moments. We accounted for that in our ridership modeling and did a higher development scenario. As far as what we expect for development, we didn't get too far into detail as far as similar to what was done with the visioning process. So I'll also talk to you just briefly on the Kenrick station. We had a few similar challenges. Access for both pedestrians and drivers was a consideration. Understanding where the BRT platform would be in the facility and what would need to change there, and then also would this necessarily drive any changes to capacity at Kenrick Park and Ride. Currently today it's at 70% use. It's been that since about the opening, but additional service or Orange Line service may change that in the future. And then the question of expected service demand. Of course, this is a high demand for express service in the area. There's not much local, so there's not really any precedent there for us to understand what demand would be for a service like BRT. For the routing, we looked through a handful of different combinations for getting to and from the stations. Assuming we go down to Kenrick, we would route the buses once it goes from Burnsville Center. We would go down to Crystal Lake Road, and we found that to be a good deal faster than getting back to 35W near the Burnsville Center Mall area, given the traffic. So when we go down to Kenrick Avenue, we assume a turnaround at CASA 50. This leaves open the possibility of an additional station at CASA 50, which would be, in terms of operations, pretty cost neutral, and we could fit a smaller station in there. As far as what we developed for routing, the estimation for additional fleet for these further service would be about 1 to 2 additional buses to operate to just Burnsville Center Mall. To Kenrick Park and Ride, we would require 4 to 5 additional buses for the Orange Line fleet. So for phase 1, they're looking at 11 buses total just for that section. So as I noticed, as Regina noted, there was some questions again as far as what we can expect for ridership in the quarter, given that this is new service and again a very high level of service. We stopped the study for a short while to address this question, and then came up with a plan to cooperate with Metropolitan Council and update their ridership model to factor in this service. And get an understanding of whether this is whether it meets kind of the regional expectations for service for BRT. They have a set of standards for BRT, for light rail, for commuter rail to help guide this process and processes that are similar to this. So what we had done was we had created 3 scenarios. One for the present day, 2020. Looked out at 2040 projections based on some of the updated comprehensive plans. And then we also looked at a higher development scenario for 2040, assuming that there's some redevelopment in and around the Burnsville Center Mall area. So going by station here, Burnsville Center, and I'll focus on the Burnsville Central Station here. For the year 2020, we would, if service was operating today based on demand and just the general characteristics of the area, we'd be looking at about 220 to 240 boardings per weekday. For 2040, just based on adopted plans, we'd be looking at a few dozen more riders per day, upwards of 290 boardings per weekday. Looking at a higher development scenario, we're looking at about 500 boardings per day. So a couple of considerations just for the redevelopment. What's commonly seen for estimating transit demand is that employment will tend to generate more demand versus residential. So given that, there's a lot of employment there today, as we know, there's more residential. I think the big wild card is how much employment stays within this area when we look out a couple decades. And if there's a lot that may hold, more promise than seeing some of the residential growth in the area.
So Joe and Regina, when you're doing this study, are you looking at reverse commute?
Mayor Couts, yes, that is factored in. So employment in this area, if
Yeah.
we see, more, if we see what's existing, the service will account for people traveling, from north of the river down here. So it's in both directions.
Thank you, because I think that's important. Talent is a big shortage, and we want to make sure that we retain what we have, and also to attract new talent. And if we're going to attract new talent, they may come from north of the river to help our businesses get at full capacity for the talent that they need. So I think reverse commute for this part, and especially also down at the heart of the city, that reverse commute is factored in.
And that's I think that's a key for success for transitway services like this stuff. It can't be based on just the predominant things or the commuting to downtown. It's going to be running all day, both directions, and we need to see demand kind of commensurate with that.
Because in some of the studies that you're doing, you're also, Regina and Joe, talking to some of our large employers, like Collins, the hospital, Pepsi. Pepsi's pretty steady.
We have had touch points with Collins Aerospace and with the medical campus as well. And certainly they do see this as an asset for their employees, and definitely have been engaged.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So one of the more key metrics that's used in the region for articulating demand is passengers per service hour. So that's just a measure of efficiency for how many people get on the bus for every hour that bus is out on the street in service. If we were to look at just the section between Burnsville Parkway and Burnsville Central Station, and based on this ridership, we were expecting about 9 boardings per additional hour of service in 2020. If we look at the section between the Burnsville Central Station and the Kenrick Park and Ride, that's 6 boardings. We're estimating 6 boardings per additional hour of service out there. So we earlier in this study, we also considered, we did kind of some higher level estimates of some of the stations down in Lakeville, and they typically did not bear out as well because those are, again the demand is pretty light. The accessibility is an issue, and people are typically looking for express service straight to downtown, none of the intermediate stops. So those ones we had left off a little bit earlier in the study. So for the so going back to those numbers up top, as well as the efficiency, the efficiency metric of passengers per in-service hour, the regional standards regional guidelines rather that have been developed are looking for typically 200 boardings or more per station, and then looking at for an entire line boardings passengers per service hour, a measure of 25 boardings per service hour or more. So the entire. Are
these the critical criteria that we will get funding?
Mayor Couts, these won't be used for any funding decisions. What we're anticipating for funding this, we're not looking at pursuing federal funds in the New Starts process, which is what some of the light rail projects in the first part of Orange Line are funded through. We'll be looking at county funds as well as some federal funds through the regional solicitation. That's what we're anticipating right now.
And because when you say regional standards, So I'm wondering if,
Oh.
how do they get plugged in and when we're looking at the Met Council to be a partner?
So they, you know, they'll want to consider this as far as, you know, understanding what level of service is appropriate. It's not as strict. These are more guidelines than a standard, and where, you know, where we'll where these will have a place in the conversation, you know, with Met Council when we look to implement the, you know, the service. But I think it'll be, you know, one of a handful of considerations as far as just connections to an area, as far as, and then the populations that we're serving and their needs and level of dependency. So those are going to be other things to consider as well. But it will be something under consideration.
Okay. All right, yeah. Dan?
A little off, a little bit here, but will the BRT coming out of Lakeville stop at the Burnsville Mall on the way downtown? Will that be one of their stops?
No.
At the
From Kenrick to
Yeah.
Burnsville Center.
Will any of the buses coming out of Lakeville actually stop in Burnsville, or will they just go all the way through?
So the Orange Line, so on the Orange Line, the terminal station would, in one scenario, would be the Kenrick Park and Ride. Coming northbound, they would come to the Burnsville Central Station and then
They
to
would,
those
okay.
phase
That's
one.
what I
Yeah.
wanted to
So
clarify. Thank you.
each trip will hit each station in
I
sequence.
know that's important to Lakeville, that they can get to Burnsville. In fact, our Burnsville Center is important to Lakeville. I heard the other day at a meeting, so.
Will they also be stopping then in the Parkway 35W interchange station?
Yes, yep. So the BRT service, yeah, they'll all be
Okay,
in
they'll
sequence
make
for
those
each-
stops through all of the BRT service line.
Correct.
Have service between Lakeville
Yeah.
and Burnsville.
Okay.
So the going back to the measures here. So the it's a what we estimated for the extension stations is a little bit low compared to the standard for productivity for the line. The overall performance, including phase one, though, even with the extension stations, is pretty high. It's close to about 100 and 180. So there's a couple questions out there still. Of course, there's you know, whether we want to focus on just the increment and understand what the efficiency is there, or if we want to look at the effect it has on the whole line. The question too for Kenrick Park and Ride, what we saw from the ridership estimation is that it's almost entirely to downtown and not to any of the intermediate stations. So is BRT the answer for residents in Lakeville? And then there's a little bit of uncertainty just with the estimation process. It's a little bit more vague in suburban areas, and then also a little bit of uncertainty given that this is a new corridor for service other than express. So, moving on to the recommendation, what we've developed as a group through this process is to recommend for an extension of the Orange Line to serve Burnsville Central Station. But that recommendation is conditional on a couple of things. One is understanding the pace and the nature of redevelopment and the timing at Burnsville Central Station in the mall and then north of 42, and understanding kind of where, you know, when we see concrete steps for redevelopment there, and if that may be an area that can warrant a higher level of service. And then two is understanding the performance of the Orange Line Phase 1 once it begins service in 2021. There's still a little bit of, as I know, there's some uncertainty with the extension and knowing the ridership there, but there's still some uncertainty as far as the Phase 1 as well. In addition to that, one other thing that may be an indication is some new service that MBTA will be implementing near the start of the Orange Line that will connect Burnsville Center Mall to Burnsville Transit Station and roughly follow that same path, although not on 35W, and that may also give us some understanding of demand in the area. So in total, I think there's just a little too many moving parts and with respect to demand and development in the area to make a definite call on extending today, but maybe in 3, 4, 5 years from now, we may have a better ability to make a decision as a county and with the cities and as a region. One thing that we are not recommending in the near and medium term is service to Kenrick Park and Ride, so that just based on the efficiency and then just the overall travel market, and then the potential for reverse commute, we don't see that necessarily driving the need for BRT service any time in the near and midterm.
Yeah, I see a correlation between the work that you're doing and the work that Doug's doing with the study of the 42 corridor and then what you want to implement with regard to BRT.
Mayor Kaus, that's key because because of the mobility improvements, especially for pedestrians, is going to be very important here. So it's a challenge for anybody to cross 42 today, and making sure that's safe for people will help extend the usability of transit here. So, very briefly, just going on to the where we're moving on from here. So we've wrapped up all of the technical work at the end of last year. In the near future, the county will be seeking resolutions of support from both Burnsville and Lakeville. I'll be supplying Regina with some draft resolution language there, and then later on this year we'll be seeking amendment to the transportation policy plan to get this programmed and recognized at a regional level. And then, as I noted before, in future years, we'll want to monitor and understand how the first phase of Orange Line performs and see how that might give us some indication of when to pursue an extension.
Okay, great. Any questions for Joe and Regina? Absolutely.
Good update.
Oh, yeah. Ryan?
I would just like to comment that this is what we would have hoped for, that they're gonna wait until development happens. We don't wanna put the station in the wrong spot. And then maybe to Councilmember Gustafson's question, without the station at Kenrick, there won't be a stop, just so you're clear.
No, I get that.
Okay, that express buses aren't gonna
Get
stop
on the
there.
bus.
Okay,
Can't get
all right.
there.
Yeah.
That's my only thought.
And of course, members of the council, when the time comes that we need to put a resolution, I think this is something that we need to get done so that the Met Council understands that we want them to be on board with this. I mean, it's in our comp plan. Okay. So Melanie, when the time is ready. Okay, is there anything else you need from us, Joe?
That's all for tonight.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you and Regina and Doug and everybody from the county for your partnership and the work that we do together to serve the people that we're here to serve,
I didn't know if you.
our
you.
residents and businesses and guests. Okay. Thank you so much.
Got it. I thought they were asking for it tonight. Okay. Got it.
Okay. The Center Village Traffic Study, and this is Jen. So it's good to see you and Brenda back. And I think you heard from us. So, Jen?
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, we're back tonight with some final recommendations before we prepare the final study document. So Brandon's going to go through briefly kind of what we've done to date and then get into more details on the actual mitigation measures. Just to keep in mind, these are at a concept level, not a detailed design level. Further study will be needed, and there'll be a lot of partnerships that we need, both with MnDOT and Dakota County. So as we're going through, this is a study that will need to have additional detail worked out in the future.
Thank you. So the first 10 slides I'll keep pretty brief. They're somewhat review. So there's several goals of the study, and it's really to get an understanding, building off of the vision, what the impacts of both background growth, transit, and impacts of the redevelopment will be on the surrounding roadway network. and ultimately develop several concepts, or develop concepts and ultimately some phasing and estimates to allow for future planning and programming and a plan to move forward. This is basically the study approach, so we'll end up ultimately developing those forecasts, analyzing existing and future, and develop mitigation measures. The study area is bounded by Portland to the east, McAndrews on the north, 5 on the west, and South Cross on the south, with really the center being the Burnsville Center and the interchanges of 35E and 35W along 42. Roughly, there's 36 intersections in the study. Existing conditions, everybody's aware that a lot of the primary congestion is along 42, which is the black box, and the yellow circles represent intersections that have higher than expected crash rates given their characteristics. We went through a process building off what Dakota County has done to develop our background growth, so they have their travel demand model, so we use that along with good counts that we collected at the Burnsville Center to get an idea of what's going on today and understand what that background growth would be. And then we did work building off some of the orange line related planning, an idea of what transit might change. So we've increased what we might see today of 1.5% up to 3%, ultimately reducing vehicles. I'm going to present some level of service graphics. Those graphics are based on, you've seen these metrics before, basically how many seconds of delay per vehicle. Unsignalized generally have lower thresholds than signalized because people are used to sitting a little bit longer at a signal. And generally, we characterize E's and F's as being undesirable. This is overall intersection level of service, so that's not to say, this is just for the PM peak. We kind of, the AM is less intense. Saturdays kind of has its own differences where it's more intense, but as kind of a baseline, we focus a lot on PM, even though we analyzed all of it. And so this shows overall level of service, so this is not to say there aren't some movements that have level of service E and F, but at this planning level, it makes some sense to present this way. So you're seeing overall we have one intersection at level of service D. It's the southbound 35 E ramp. The other ones, like I say, you'll see some movements that have challenges, but really what's important is kind of the change between what we see at an existing level and what we see in 2040 with just background growth and no mitigation. So the next slide basically shows with that background growth along 42. No trips being added for the center village redevelopment vision, which we focus by 2040 on the south side in the mall area, that there's just a continued deterioration along 42 where we see a lot of overall intersections, level of service F's, E's, D's. You do see movements, no action along McAndrews, so there's some background issues there, some challenges more on the side streets at Irving and Burnhaven, making the left, and then County Road 5 and McAndrews, there's some challenges ultimately there anticipated in the future. So that's something that's really more of a focus of some corridor study that the county and the city would work forward, a lot of the county, because it's a county road, developing some solutions there. So that's without the vision. And so then we built off what was done and all the good work that was done as the vision. We estimated the number of anticipated trips. And so basically, there's about 18,400 trips to the site today in the mall area. The anticipated increase based on growth would be an additional 20,000. So it's about a 200% increase in traffic. Based on that, we end up saying, okay, we already know that no build, there's some issues. And last time we talked a little bit about some mitigation. So now we're going to kind of dive into some things that are a little bit different at this location. We kind of stepped back because everybody, when we started to look at some of the things that we presented at a high level last time on 42, it's like, well, are things different here compared to some of the other regional malls? And this, not to dwell on every volume, but there's really kind of a couple characteristics you see in a lot of the malls around here. On the right, Southdale, Rosedale, Eden Prairie. On the left is Burnsville. And what you'll see is those are generally served by two interchanges on different roadways. For example, Rosedale has County Road or Fairview and Snelling at B2. Burnsville, basically, you can see there's a lot of traffic on County Road.
49,000 versus 23.
You got it, yep.
On both France and Fairview.
Yep, so what this shows is exactly the fact that Doug mentioned it before, you're approaching 40,000 on County Road 42. You've only got, 10,000 roughly or less on your other roads. You look at some of the other malls and it's a lot more equally distributed. And so that's some of where you'll see improvements, and there's a lot focused on 42 just because there aren't other places to relieve the traffic, and the two interchanges you have are both serving the same road. So this was kind of interesting because it helps show why things are a little different. We then dove into future mitigation, and there were three primary goals that we looked at. We wanted to make improvements in our multimodal, so we've discussed before, addition of trails, we'll do that again, pedestrian connection under 42. We wanted to provide a similar level of service as today because we know there's some challenges, so we wanted to make sure on Saturday that things aren't just going up and down the interstate and people actually are able to visit the site. In PM, we wanted to make sure things didn't deteriorate too much, but we weren't designing everything to be A and B. There's going to be some congestion at a busy area. So from a mitigation standpoint and kind of the strategy, I'm going to walk through the layout that's been broke kind of into three chunks. But this kind of talks a little bit about how we thought about the order of stuff, because you want to start mitigation less and then build on it. And so we wanted to build off the vision. That was kind of the big thing. And then we looked at transit and pedestrian improvement. So we have the sidewalks or the trails and underpass. And then when we looked at roadway improvements, we started at the more easy stuff. Hey, let's do some adjustments to signal timings. And you can see as we go down the list, things kind of build. Where is there one critical intersection that caused a lot of issues that we can fix? Are there places where we can add dual turn lanes that improve things? And ultimately, you get more toward the bottom, and we've got additional connections to interstates, which we aren't doing a connection at McAndrews. But that's stuff that we had talked about at a very high level and got the good input to say we're not doing that, so that's off the table. But it was part of the early discussions. And ultimately, we developed an ITS solutions like variable message signs at the bottom. So ultimately, before we had some higher level improvements, and we've developed a concept drawing that has more detail related to lanes, widths, right-of-way impacts. And what I've got is basically three that are shown. So this is kind of the west side. Burn Haven is on the west, and I'm going to explain a little bit the overview of kind of the improvements that are included here. So along both the north and the south side, we've got 10-foot trails. So there's improvements where there's locations now that are sidewalks. So the purple are the trails, the blue is the boulevard. In terms of, there's a 3/4 intersection between Aldrich and Burnhaven. So that's been converted to a right in, right out. Just to the east of that, you can see a purple line in the orange underpass, which has been laid out more like a bridge. So it's not like a box culvert where it's tight and confined and can be intimidating, a little bit scary. It's more 50 feet wide. It would have some options to have some openings to let some light in and be more inviting for pedestrians. The reason why there's the magnitude of yellow is on the west end, there's basically, we've added turn lanes, dual turn lanes at Burnhaven. We've added an eastbound dual turn lane at Aldrich. There's already one westbound, so you're kind of utilizing the left turn space at the current 3/4 to provide dual left turn lanes. And ultimately, at the right in the right out going eastbound from the mall, we add an additional lane that would carry through to the east and ultimately would become a lane that would drop at 35W north. So we're adding a lane eastbound. Westbound, we're not adding a lane, but by the time you jockey the road around and get things to fit, you're pretty much reconstructing the road, at least at this stage, from a planning level. The connection, I'm going to talk more through the Aldrich extension through the site, but it's a 4-lane roadway. The volumes anticipated on that are about 14,000 vehicles per day. It's laid out with a wide median, so there can be plantings, and we'll show some other examples of that. It's kind of a whole separate section. But those in kind of a overview of what is shown on this page. So are there questions? Because it's a lot of detail.
Yeah, Melanie?
I was just asking Jen, I wonder do we have a pointer that we could
Yeah.
use during the discussion?
Yeah, because when you're talking Aldrich, is Aldrich
Does this one work if I do the red? Yeah, it does.
But they won't be able to see it on this.
So it's the blue and the yellow going north and south, that's Aldrich, correct?
There's just a lot going on.
Yeah,
It is a lot
that's,
going
that's
on.
Aldrich.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking, that's Aldrich right
This is
there.
Aldrich right here.
Yes,
And currently.
and that's where the cul-de-sac is going to be, go my left, your right, where the pink
pink.
Pink and the orange, right
Oh,
there.
yeah, that's the underpass.
That's the underpass.
Pedestrian
Yeah,
underpass, yep.
so that's what. And I'm looking, how many lanes are we adding? I was trying to count how many lanes.
It would all be one additional lane eastbound in this segment. So it would go from 3 lanes to a 4-lane section between the right out over to the interchange with 35W to the north.
On the west side of Aldrich, you have quite a few lanes, and then when you're going, you cross Aldrich, then it goes down to like 4 lanes.
This way.
You have 2 lanes are left turn lanes going eastbound and
Yeah,
northbound.
I see that,
and you have
but
a
I
right
can't
turn
see it
lane.
real well, but
And
I
then a
can
right
see
turn
that.
lane here.
Yeah. Okay, so there are two left turn lanes,
Right here.
and then there are 2 right turn lanes, right?
Just one.
Is that what you
A
have?
single right turn lane.
A single
and
right
then there's
turn.
4 through lanes. So there should be seven approach lanes there. Yep. And today there'd be a single left turn lane.
Yeah.
3 through lanes and a right turn lane. So we're
Okay.
adding 1 through lane and we're converting it from a single left eastbound to a dual left eastbound.
Okay.
Westbound at that same intersection is already 2 lanes making a left, a westbound left onto Aldrich. So that exists. And really, there's the same lanes going westbound. It's yellow more just by the time you shift some of the lanes to get them to line up to accommodate that additional eastbound lane. There's just pavement that needs to be reconstructed.
And where you have 42, it is right there.
That's Burn Haven.
That's Burnhaven, because I was going to say that.
And that has basically the additional left turn lanes, eastbound and westbound. That's the biggest change there.
They're dual in each
They're
direction.
dual lefts and now they're singles under today's existing conditions.
Okay. Any other thought? Comments? No, now it's, because when you're looking at it and you see all of these lanes and you're saying, okay, you're gonna cross over, now it's down to, okay.
Oh, can you go back?
Yeah.
One thing today, you can make a left in.
Yeah.
And this would not allow that. So it becomes, that's the 3/4 that we were talking about. Now it's a right in, right out on both sides. And the median goes through.
So this, to keep everybody on their toes, I've got the page rotated, so north is on your left. I already talked generally about what's kind of going on to the west of the southbound ramps. So basically, we're carrying that additional through lane through to ultimately tie in and drop at the 35W northbound ramps. And the way we do it, we don't have to impact the pavement on the bridge that was just done, the width works. We have shown an additional lane, basically additional choice, or what we call a GORE, as you exit southbound 35W, where you can exit, carry up to 42, or you can go under 42 to gain access to the east side of the redevelopment area. This is similar to what we have shown today, or in the past. As you exit, we've converted at the top
Well,
at
that's
42.
a better
there's
mitigation.
What's
That's
that?
a better mitigation than McAndrews. So this way, okay,
There's a triple left turn coming southbound to eastbound. So right now there's a dual left turn.
and that's a roundabout?
I'm sorry,
right,
up on the top of the up at the top of the ramp.
Right here.
There's going to be 3 lefts.
Yeah.
Currently, there's 2 left turns.
Yeah.
And then there is a change, and we talked about this last time. We'll talk about it a little bit more. But on the south side, we're only showing the dual lefts in. So you're going westbound, and you're able to turn into the site with a double left. And then we're basically showing a northbound dual right. So the left turn would get redistributed or relocated to another location. So we'll talk a little bit more about what kind of volumes we're anticipating with that. You would travel under the bridge and travel through a roundabout, and we're showing the dotted lines, that's basically where the vision
Yeah.
connections are.
Yeah.
So obviously, there can be some adjustments and additional details as more of what is actually placed at each location occurs, but the roundabout basically serves a main access into the proposed redevelopment,
Yeah.
and then it would carry to the south and tie to Buck Hill Road.
It's a better mitigation strategy.
The X is basically just to make it clear that that connection is basically severed, and it basically reroutes through kind of the exterior northeast corner of the site.
Yeah, Kara.
So are you saying where it's X'd, that road will be ripped up?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
That's Buck Hill Road right now, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So this will remain south.
That will continue on. It's that one piece right there where you have the X.
Yep.
Correct.
Yeah.
And this intersection
ridge
gets
going down
reconfigured.
anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's-
Kara?
So if a person is in town and they're east, how are they getting to Buck Hill?
If they're traveling from the east going west, or
Yeah.
they're
From Apple Valley
Okay,
going
got it.
into Savage.
basically they would go west, they would take a left at the dual left turn and go in.
Right in here.
Yep, take a left there, and then they'd turn and circulate to get back to the roundabout.
Okay.
The challenge of having all the connections with the roundabout, you can't have the two legs come together, like a 20-degree separation. So some of it is to have this access come off and go under. We have to provide some geometry to get them to tie into the roundabout. And to have another one go right here just is prohibitive because you can't get the roundabout layout to work geometrically with that one-way ramp coming off. So, there are more questions? We do have another slide a little bit where we'll talk a little bit about volumes and what that means.
Okay.
The other option for that person is to come 35E, get on 35E coming from the east.
Yeah.
And exit off at 160th, which is actually faster to get to Buck Hill.
Right,
160
but
is
even
not
if
like
you're traveling from the other direction, if you are on 42,
Yeah, you
And
can get off at
you
Plymouth
want-
also.
you want to get
To
there,
Grand.
you need to jump off, drive through the mall, hit the roundabout, hop back onto the road. Okay.
Yeah, the other is that if you're coming from Apple Valley and wanting to go to Buck Hill, you can get off on Plymouth to Grand, and then you can get right over to Buck Hill Road and go south.
One thing that we'll be talking about later is some of that ITS, the electronic wayfinding signage.
Yeah.
And so there's always options to get people around with electronic signage and static signage.
My apologies. So I just have to, the idea of Center Village is to be less motorized and people walk around and it's park-like, and so instead we dump people into it to drive to get back onto that road.
I think we have some more detail on that coming up in some future slides.
Okay.
We kind of zone in on the Center Village and then the traffic going through there.
Okay. All right. Proceed.
Any questions? I'm gonna talk about what's kind of on what would be your upper right side on the next slide. So are there any questions, I guess, on the southbound connections? More on the west side of
No,
35?
probably you'll get more once you get into the next slides.
There you go. So this section, the things that really changed is we have got basically a westbound lane that's added pretty much just to the east of the northbound ramp on 30 to go into 35E. And that carries through Nicollet and basically ends going on to up at the 35W ramp northbound. So we got one additional lane that carries through it and ends up dropping at the northbound ramp to get onto 35W because there's a heavy volume there. There is an eastbound lane that's added just to the east of the bridge deck of 35W. And so we add an additional lane and that basically carries through Nicollet, and then ultimately, with the lanes being realigned, there ends up being a lane that drops at the northbound ramp onto 35E. So eastbound to northbound, that's where the lane ends up disappearing, so we don't have a bunch of yellow to the east of the northbound ramps. And then the other detail here, I mean, we do carry the trails along, both sides of the roadway. And then that's really the bulk of it. There is one change more in operations that we're showing. Right now at Nicollet, northbound traffic goes and then southbound traffic goes, and there's PED phases tied to each. Nicollet becomes a challenging intersection because you have so much volume north and south and east and west. And so we do have a PED phase where we would basically have all the PEDs cross on the west leg, just to allow the PED phase to come up with the southbound traffic instead of doing it both northbound and southbound, because it just ends up being a challenge to basically process that much traffic through the intersection if the PED phase is always coming up. And so you can serve the PEDs on the one side, and that's kind of a way we were able to maintain operations through here. Any questions on this slide? So basically add a lane westbound for a chunk, add a lane eastbound for a chunk, and then there's the phasing adjustment at Nicollet.
Okay.
Kind of building off and tying to what Jen mentioned, there's variable message signing, intelligent transportation systems that have been used successfully at the Mall of America. This is an example of that. They have a similar system installed near Canterbury off of Kasai 83 in Shakopee, Canterbury Downs. The concept here would be to install signs, and this could be expandable and scalable as, maybe building off some of what the 42 vision does, but we have signs that basically would take traffic and you could be able to route it where South Cross connects to the east at 42, and you could have some signs when it's busy to basically say alternative route, to route people through South Cross, and ultimately for two reasons. One, to bypass if they were just through trips, and the other to actually access the mall from the south, so not everybody is accessing it from 42.
Well, way back when South Cross and McAndrews were designed, it was to take traffic off of 42.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's the best way to go to the mall today.
yeah, so the locals know to take South Cross on the weekends or McAndrews.
And that's good. This ties together. The red line is basically some interconnect improvements, so you could coordinate and operate it, so like fiber connections and controller upgrades, so we've assumed some of that in the estimate. Looking at the volumes that go through, this is an improvement that I think could take some pain off at the peak periods, but you're not going to implement this one and avoid some of the infrastructure. It won't remove enough traffic. So just this is similar to what we had before, but this basically looks at the PM with the mitigation we just walked through, and the development traffic. So this has the background growth, the redevelopment, and before, you'll remember under existing condition, there was one yellow D.
Yeah.
Here there's 4 yellow Ds, but as a whole, most of it's green. This is kind of where we started with the one yellow D under existing conditions. This is basically where we were without any of the site traffic, without any mitigation. And so what we're showing here, we are comfortable with the fact that, hey, it's basically getting us to a place that's similar to today. There's quite a bit of mitigation, but it's similar to today, but it's also conveying a lot of traffic. So that was kind of the punchline of these 3 slides. We have done some planning level estimates. So the estimates here are, we've kind of broke the project into several areas. We've got, from a kind of a phasing and logical chunk perspective, there's area 1 that is kind of farthest to the east. Area, which is basically from 35W to the east. Area 2 would be kind of 42 right in front of the mall from the southbound ramps west. Area 3, we isolated the southbound ramp, and then Area 4, we just basically broke out the PED bridge. And so the costs that you see there include some estimates at right-of-way, some contingency, 20% contingency, some direct costs. But as you look at it, it's certainly a significant project where some of that collaboration will end up being important.
That's today's dollars.
That's today's dollars. And so that's a total.
ITF handle that?
No, we're gonna need TIF to help mitigate some of that cost.
Well, and
For a sales tax.
Yeah, that's not.
County Road 42 would be, if we partner with the county, it's an 85-15 split. They have to agree to these types of improvements and working with their study process. And we would be, looking for outside funding sources for all of these improvements.
Be grant opportunities like you're all familiar with, SDP, build, infra, could be some deed type opportunities, but they're all a process.
You all need to make sure that you update these estimates as we go along, because you're only giving us today's dollars, and all of us know that every year it goes by, those costs are gonna go up, and the cost of labor isn't going down. And I've seen those costs and all the other stuff.
105% each year.
So.
Phasing perspective.
And we know,
We saw that on County Road 5.
yeah,
Just from a phasing perspective, we did do a little bit of looking at kind of the initial potential phase where the things would redevelop on the east side and what projects made the most sense to occur first. Area 1's pretty critical, and unfortunately that happens to be farther from the site.
Yeah.
But Area 1 is critical to get people to and from.
yeah. Dan?
Well, being that we're talking about a whole lot of work being done on a county road, how much will the county be involved in funding this project?
So the county cost participation right now is 85% county, 15 city.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
we would partner together to try and reduce that so that there's outside funding sources. And
This
we'd be
is,
looking at
this
grants.
is only
That
the
could
study.
Conceivably be 85% of that 36 could be county money.
Yeah,
The ITS system wouldn't be included, and the
Yeah.
Area 3 would be on the MnDOT system.
yeah.
So it'd be Area 1 and 2 that
Yeah.
would
1
be
and 2.
partnered with.
Then the state would be part of it? Okay.
Yeah, I
Just
think
brings it down a bit
the funding sources would be good for us to understand all of that. And I think, Doug, the 85-15 is on the study, correct?
Yes, it is, but I agree with Jen that that cost share is intended to also be a guidance for capital projects on a principal arterial. That's the type of roadway we have here.
Okay,
And incidentally, that status does heighten the probability of getting federal funding. I can't, it's very difficult to speak to
yeah.
federal funding.
Yeah, you
processes,
can't speak
but
to
it-
federal
But
funding.
it could help.
So
Yeah, Jen?
One thing we're looking with this study is as a jumping off point to be looking for those alternate funding sources. So at the end, we'd be asking for council to adopt the study so that we can take it as a council-approved study to then go and dive in deeper for funding sources.
Okay. All right.
But Area 1 would go first, ideally, because that was needed to process traffic kind of timing wise.
Yeah,
Area 2 and 3, there's some flexibility as to which one would occur first.
and Area 4 is out there.
Area 4 is out there, but it certainly would be nice to do as part of Area 2, but these all cost money. So, I mean, it's just you'd be impacting 42 twice. So,
Okay.
so I did mention we discussed a little bit more some of the internal roadways, and
Yeah.
we've really focused at just kind of
On
an
Aldrich.
initial level of what Aldrich would look like. So basically, I mentioned before, is you're talking about 14,000 vehicles a day. We do have some turn lanes to the north, so we'll flip to the next page and look at that. We basically showed the other connections as part of the vision. Those were the dotted lines that you've gotten to see a little bit of. There's obviously going to be some refinement as more details understood about the development as to how things feel, where the intensity is. And there's a couple similar examples of roads like this that I think are important to show. One of them's Nicollet Avenue in the heart of the city, and then there's kind of the 16th Street and West End. So this is just kind of looking more zoomed in at the center of the layout. So we're basically showing a 4-lane roadway all the way from the north, and it runs all the way through to the south. We're showing a wider median, so it would allow for plantings and some left turn lanes. We're not showing a bunch of right turn lanes because there's a balance as to how wide you want to make everything with pedestrians. This access just based on where, at this stage, based on the turn lanes are about 300 feet long, which is, they feel long based on the site, but we run into them all the time. So we've got longer turn lanes, and because this connection is in the influence area of those, we're showing this as a right in, right out. Obviously, as the vision shapes, and there could be some changes to that, but at this point, with what I know today, it would be challenging to have people turn left here. Those are kind of the biggest points I had here. Any questions on this slide? And then I'll show a couple of screenshots of examples. This is one you're all very familiar with. This conveys about 15,600 vehicles a day. I want to make sure I'm not lying. 15,800 vehicles a day. We were talking 14,000 on the last slide. It's a 4-lane roadway. This happens to have both left and rights. Here's a West End, which is kind of an interesting one, where it's the shopping area up at St. Louis Park. This is a 4-lane roadway. It's got some enhanced pedestrian features like rectangular flashing beacons at the crossing. It's got boulevard trees. There's certainly things you can do from an urban design, landscaping standpoint to certainly make it more of a place, make it feel certainly less intense. And so this is something that roadway could look like as things are developed and the vision continues to move forward.
And so if I could just speak to the need for a wider Aldrich, it's when we talked about how many vehicles are going to be circulating inside the redevelopment area, it's significant. And so we do need somewhat of that backbone or spine major road through the site. Then the white dash lines would be more the smaller streets that we kind of were talking about, but this Aldrich extension would be a main road through.
This is the slide that I wanted to discuss a little bit, that talks a little bit about where some of the, last time we chatted, there was quite a bit of discussion about the northbound traffic on Buck Hill Road. So, I gotta find where I'm at. So basically, there's traffic now where you would normally go northbound today, you would drive through and you connect right to the intersection, right? And so we have shown that, okay, as part of this concept, you've got a roundabout where you travel into the internal but exterior roadway of the network. You'd drive to the north if you wanted to go right, and you'd come up and take a right.
Okay.
The right turns, you
So
turn.
it skirts on the outside.
Yeah. The lefts are really, okay, where do the lefts go? Because the lefts aren't accommodated by that, and what are the magnitude? So basically, the volumes that I show here, basically roughly 14,000 vehicles here, 14,006, here's 14,000. And the 16,008 are basically what we'd anticipate to be the volumes on those 3 roadways in 2040. So they're in the neighborhood of 50% or 150% of the day, or double, depending on the roadway. This is generating quite a bit more traffic, so that's a lot of what's driving it. If we were to say, okay, what number of that volume is the lefts? It's about 2,000 vehicles a day. So it's not the majority, but it's a volume set. And if I were looking at some of the things that could be done, this is down in this location, we kind of identify this is where some of the key signing could be to help get people to use some alternative routes, such as Burnhaven to come up. Some will maybe gravitate and go through, do something through the site and then leave. So just at an early level, I would anticipate, maybe half go down Aldrich, half go down Burnhaven. You're talking about 1,000 vehicles a day, which I'm not saying that's nothing, but it's about 8% of the volume that's going to use it anyway. And that would be similar to the high. I mean, if you were to just isolate 1,000 vehicles a day, what does that feel like? It's the high end of a local road. But 1,000 on, 14,000, it's not a local road, it's a component of that. So that's kind of what we would anticipate would shift around, so.
Okay. Any questions? Do you have another slide, or is that?
I do. I got a conclusion slide. We're almost there.
Okay. Well, let's see your conclusion slide.
So, some of the big things, just in a nutshell, there's some challenges here compared to other malls, just based on how the roadways align and some of the accesses from the regional roadway network. So we talked a little bit about that. We understand that there's some excessive delays that are going to happen without this project. And so there's some things that have to happen anyway but then you add another roughly 20,000 trips. Some of those things get bigger, but some things would have to be done regardless. We're looking at about a 200% increase in traffic, so we talked a little bit about that. That certainly drives some of the impacts, and we have focused on trying to get more multimodal connections. That southbound connection may be a part of that orange line connection long term. I mean, there's some things that would have to tie in with that. Certainly trying to get trails where they make sense. And the underpass is certainly something that makes a lot of sense, but if you're at grade crossing, 42 is going to continue to be a wide road. Mitigation could be built kind of in the 3 or 4 stages we discussed about, with the east being kind of first. ITS and signal timing are part of the solution. That concept estimate, which is in today's dollars about $36 million, will require collaboration and some teamwork and effort to get, and ultimately there'll be some refinement as, the development details are going. So those are kind of the conclusions. That's just an overview, a little layout if there were questions, but really it's open for whatever you guys.
I think we asked our questions as you went along, and we just look forward as you continue to do this work.
So the next steps for us is Brandon and his team are finalizing the written study document, and then we would anticipate coming back to the council just for a resolution adopting that, so that we can take that plan and go forward and try and find funding sources, build these partnerships, and then realizing that timing is key with the redevelopment.
Okay, thank you. Ryan?
I would just add, going back to the 13 study,
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff likely won't occur till the Dakota County study's done. I mean, they're gonna take it, but
Yeah.
that's gonna really, it could be altered a bit when Dakota County goes through it. But this is a tremendous jumping off stage through the Dakota County study, so they know what we are thinking, what we're wanting, and we're lucky to have Doug as part of our team, so there's no lack of, or no loss in translation.
Yeah, no, thank you. And after hearing Doug's report and Brandon's report and all of the others, when you're looking at staging in terms of the building blocks of the projects that we have, this one becomes more important, I believe. I don't know how the council feels then on the 13 side, even though there's a lot more conflicts and crashes on the 13 side.
It's just higher speed, really. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
I
crashes.
know, and then you look at this, but this is going to drive redevelopment and the things that we're trying to do. So, yeah, it's not an easy thing for you all to go through, but
There's a lot of chicken and egg with this one, too.
I know.
If nothing ever happens
I
at
know.
the center, so
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
plan all this stuff out? And if
yeah, I mean,
dominoes
we've
don't
got
start
some,
falling.
we've got a lot of things that we have to take care of. It's all how we get it done, and there's all of the money that needs to be cobbled together. And then getting a resolution so you can go forward and look at grants and our partners and who can bring in and how much that is going to be. And I just get anxious because you put 36 million. That's in today's dollars.
We can certainly have written into the document that it will say today's dollars, and then to increase each year beyond that a certain percentage.
You need to do that. And the reason I say that, and I know that Dan G. also understands this, when we did 5 and 13, even though it's a county road and a state road, but we had to drive it. Replacement project and budget update. Chief, gentlemen, you're hitting it off first, right?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, actually let Garrett, our Parks,
Oh,
Recreation,
Garrett.
and Facilities
All
Director,
right,
give us the
Garrett.
intro.
Garrett's going to do that. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Good
Go
evening,
for it,
Madam.
Garrett.
Good evening,
And then you
Madam
want to
Mayor,
introduce?
council members. Yes, in addition to the chief to my right here, we have Quinn Hudson. He is the principal of CNH Architect and part of our core team working on this project with us.
Yeah, welcome. Our work sessions are informal, so usually in the council meetings, we use everybody's surname, but here we use your first name, Quinn, so welcome.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, so this evening for this portion of the presentation, we're going to take a look at our guiding principles real quickly, talk about the facilities plan that took place in 2016. We referenced that there's been some programming processes going on with our core team, and talk about budget, planning pressures, a financial overview, and then we'll end with a policy question. So last month, you'll recall I had an opportunity to kick off the fire station project. We talked a little bit about the history of the project, reviewed the 2016 study, talked about trends and how firefighting has changed over the last 5 years. Had a chance to introduce our team of KA and CNH, and then talked about our guiding principles. As far as the timeline is concerned, after that meeting, we had been working with CNH, the fire department staff specifically, to look at the programming for what a future station would look like, and talked about what's working well in our current station, as well as where are things lacking as far as tools and facility space is concerned to allow them to do their job. And so just over a week ago, we had our first draft of what this whole process would look like as a core team. I think I can speak for the core team that that night we lost a little bit of sleep. It was not that the design was bad, but that station in the draft concept did look different than what the 2016 station looked like. And so we spent the last week really trying to break things down and look at what we could be sharing with you this evening as far as an update is concerned. And I will tell you that we've worked hard at doing that, but at the same time, as you look at our guiding principles, the challenge is how do you prioritize one over the other? Do we bring a station design to you that is functional for the time being, but in 5 years we may outgrow it? Do we bring a station that's less welcoming and serviceable to the community at the expense of firefighter safety and health and wellness type things? So that's really what been some of the challenges we've wrestled with over the last week. And so in the spirit of us being transparent and wanting to communicate in a timely meeting, tonight I'm going to be turning it over to the chief, and he's just going to walk through kind of what we've been experiencing up to this point, so you have all that information.
Chief.
All right, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So, talking about the facilities plan that was developed back in 2015, it proposed a 31,000 square foot fire station. It planned for the use through 2035 was what it was programmed for. It also did not contemplate any site cost work. And since then, we've learned a lot in the fire service about cancer, cardiac, and mental health. So there's some components operationally that we've learned a lot about in the last 5 years that we didn't know, that we can make some impacts on the design front to make our staff safer and be able to serve the community well. It also did include things like public restrooms, some of the mechanical spaces, elevators, things like that. So we've learned in the past couple of weeks that the plan from 2015, 2016 was insufficient to meet our current needs, let alone the needs in the future. So CNH and Cross Anderson have led us through this programming phase. And what you see up here is kind of an outline. The original outline was going through that programming phase was at a 45,000 square foot fire station. That's the footprint you see in the green. We've contemplated a couple other designs and did some value engineering. We got the fire station down to 42,000 square feet, which is the black line you see there right now. Those of you familiar with the site, 143rd and Newton is there's some topography challenges there. So the more we can back away from the big hill in the back, the better. So we've cut some square footage off there. That value engineering included eliminating a couple of public restrooms. We were at 4, went down to 2. We downsized the lobby a little bit, eliminated a conference room, staff restroom and shower, library and study room, downsized the fitness room, and we also sharpened the pencil and found some efficiencies. The architects found some better ways to lay this out. We've been through a number of layouts, and this team's been great about trying to find the best value we can on the design. So the other important thing here is the timeline is very important. We've talked about this, and if you would have told me in November that we're tight on timeline to get in the ground in August or September, I would have told you it's crazy, but realistically, we're meeting at least weekly, and last week was just about every day. But we are on a week-to-week basis in order to get in the ground before it freezes and avoid winter construction and cost escalators that we had not planned on. So we really want to make sure that we stay on timeline. I truly believe this 42,000 square foot building that we value engineered meets the needs of the fire department and the community now and well into the future. I feel very confident about having the right fire station built and that we build it so that it meets the demand that we can foresee in the foreseeable future. As far as the budget pressures and planning, initially we had budgeted 14.6. That was based on that 31,000 square foot building. Obviously, you can't build a...
2015.
In 2015, yep. And we had some cost escalators, but everybody knows that the building market has significantly boomed and increased in the past 5 years beyond what we had expected or anticipated. So again, that initial budget was based on 31,000 square feet in 2015. So in order to meet those current design principles and stay on track, we're looking at $18.6 million, a $4 million increase to build that 42,000 square foot building. Again, some of that was site design work. About 600,000 of that, 650,000 of that is to put up a retaining wall. So again, there's some costs in there that we didn't contemplate. We didn't know the site at the time. So there were some things we didn't know at the time, and then some other factors. I'll turn it over to our deputy city manager to talk quickly about the financial piece of this.
So, Mayor and Council, with the increase in budget, we had originally anticipated that $14.6 million investment to be financed over a 15-year term, debt service payments of approximately $1.2 million. With an $18.6 million budget, we would recommend that we extend the term of debt to 20 years. That maintains about a $1.2 million debt service payment. That will have some impacts in terms of Phase 3, which is Fire Station 2 and City Hall remodeling, which is programmed out for 2024. Right now, we had projected to use a significant amount of cash up front to fund that project. We'll likely want to look at the model of debt to cash in terms of that investment down the road. Long story short, with these changes, the franchise fees that you've implemented will cash flow the facilities fund and will support this additional investment. It will just take a slightly different path in terms of how we use debt. In this case, we've worked with the folks at Ellers, finance staff, and our team is very comfortable in terms of using a slightly longer term debt to best fund this project. It just makes sense when it comes to this type of long-term capital investment.
Okay.
Thank you. So our policy question tonight is, does the city council desire to modify the current Fire Station 1 replacement budget to 18.6 to, again, stay on timeline and meet the guiding principles that we reviewed back in January? So stand for any questions and appreciate your time.
Well, one of the things in your presentation and also in the background, and because I was here to understand a 2015 estimated plan that was presented, you did not have site work or land factored into that. It was just the building and the footprint of the building and so forth. You've learned a great deal since then with regard to what is needed to ensure that our personnel has the right building and meets all of the different factors that they need for health and safety. And then we also factored into this building that we wanted to be community space, which wasn't factored in the 2015 plan. So a lot of things have changed since 2015. And if we're going to do it, Council, I think we need to do it right. Yeah, Danji?
Well, I agree with you. Unfortunately, in 2015, when you did this, we were also getting ready to build a police department.
Yeah.
And we couldn't do both because that would have affected our
Yeah.
credit rating and all kinds of different things. But the price we pay is, you're absolutely right. In the last 5 years, real estate and especially construction, the cost has gone up. The price of labor has gone up. I get wanting to do the work in the winter because there's more labor available then than come springtime, because that's when it just soars, labor cost. And so, yeah, we're kind of in that position. And if we're going to build it, let's do it right, and let's do it where it'll last a long time. And we've, as a council, have come together to make a commitment to grow this city in a pretty dramatic way, and people are figuring out that's what we're doing, and we need to be ready for the future as we do that, and I think that's a big part of it.
And I believe that the community wants us to take care of its assets and to also take care of the personnel who takes care of them. So, and we need to do that. Vince?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is a terribly uncommon thing for 5 years later to see price changes. And I agree with what Councilman Gustafson just said, that let's not do this halfway. Let's do this the right way, for all the reasons listed in. I think for BJ, recruitment tool, make sure you have the best facilities south of the metro. So
Do it right the first time.
Yep.
And no quilt patches later on. Kara?
This is a core city function. Yep, it was done in 2015, and here we are a few years later, although 2015 doesn't seem all that long ago. Also, in discussions with staff, they have assured me that going to 18.6 will not result in an increased levy ask nor an increased ask on the already quadrupled franchise fees. So I will go forward with this.
Okay. Dan?
Well, I don't want to repeat what other council members have said. I agree 100% on all those points. I think for the general public, they need to know that other cities that operate on a volunteer fire department model build a lot of satellite firehouses that are not $18.6 million to build. With our full-time fire department and a build from the ground up in a brand-new state-of-the-art meant to carry us for more than 15 years, 2020 to 2035, I guess maybe it was, they were thinking 20 back in 2015, but that seems like an extraordinarily short-sighted vision, a vision with short. Anyway, I think this is the credible number because it was done in a more credible manner, and it factors in existing information on the site that we didn't have. So to me, it's a one-time capital cost. We do it right for the next 40 to 50 years. We don't create higher expenses later down the road by trying to shortchange what we spend today. Just for everyone's edification, Fire Station 1, we did that about 8-9 years ago. We spent $600,000 to add a bay onto an existing fire station that we should have made the decision back then to do what we're doing today. The number wouldn't have been 18,000 back then. It would have been quite a bit smaller. And so we're already paying the price. So no more mistakes like that. Let's do it right and get it right for the next 50 years for this fire station. And quite frankly, the fire folks who are going to live there much of their life.
Yeah. And we need it to be a healthy building, not the sick one they're in now. Okay. Melanie, Chief, and Garrett, it's unanimous to move forward. And Greg?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Yeah. Anything else? Or shall we? Okay, the next item then is the Fire Station 1 replace community education space. Okay. Chief?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the next item is to talk about the Safety Town, our public education concept. for Station 1. So we'll talk about an example that was experienced by one of the council members, how we currently do public education, some preliminary design and costs, and again, a policy question for you. So Councilmember Keeley was fortunate to tour the Frisco, Texas Fire Department, and I think, Madam Mayor, you were there too. And they have a very, very robust facility in Frisco, Texas, that includes a safety town concept. There's only a
They
couple
raised
of them.
the money for this.
That's correct. So it's a safety campus attached to the fire station that does public education. So had some initial discussions with Councilmember Keeley, and I think and I won't speak for him, but his initial thought was to look at including a piece of this, not the entire safety town concept, because it's a pretty robust system. So a little bit about Frisco, Texas. They're 180,000 population. They have 58 elementary schools. It was built by donations from within the community, and they had quite a boom in the last 15 years of population. That community really built from a rural community to a very large suburb in the past 15 years. So it's a small town. It's a demo fire truck, as well as having a bedroom, living room, and kitchen area. So my initial discussion with Councilman Keeley, it sounds like the discussion was around the bedroom, living room, kitchen area to function as a public education space. And just in some context, their fire administration staff is a staff of 35, and currently we have 7. So just some context. Currently, how we do the public education in the community is we attempt to get in every kindergarten, 2nd, and 4th grade classroom for 30 minutes in October during Fire Prevention Week. We have challenges just getting into those 3 grades and spending 30 minutes just with everything that the teachers have going on, the requirements they have. But we get in most classrooms. And then during the fire muster and the open house, we use a trailer from one of our neighbors. So pictured up here is the Lakeville trailer that we use at our open house. It's got a simulated kitchen in it, bedroom, living room, that kind of thing, that can produce smoke. So that's how we currently provide public education to the community. Looking at the safety town concept, it's approximately 1,000 square feet. Construction costs are over $300,000, and then we would anticipate additional site work. We haven't figured out what that site work would be, but it could be as much as another $300,000, I would guess, given the retaining wall that we just talked about. And it would also require us to have an additional FTE in order to use this. I want to make sure if we build something like this that it's used, it's robust, and that we build those partnerships and that we get kids in there regularly so that it's not being underutilized. So that's the preliminary design costs to establish a kitchen, living room, bedroom with kind of an exit corridor in there that you could provide some fake smoke and have kids, or even adults for that matter, crawl out a window and practice some safety maneuvers. So the policy question is, does the council desire to modify the current Fire Station 1 guiding principles and budget to include a safety town education component? So I will stand for any questions.
Okay, first of all, how many elementary schools do we have? There's 2 on the west side.
10, yeah.
Okay, there's Vista View and Neal. Then you have 3 right here in the center. You've got Sky Oaks, Gideon Pond. And then you go into Byrne, because Sioux Trail's going to be closed.
Yep.
Ron,
And Echo Park.
did you say Ron?
Ron is in Egan.
Yep. But
But it's part of the district.
Yeah, but it's 191, so that's what we have. Yeah,
I'll
I'm gonna-
point out that this is not a Burnsville-only amenity. That's not meant to be just servicing Burnsville middle or grade schools. Not by any stretch.
Dan?
Enjoyed your presentation, as short as it was, but I'd like your opinion. I don't want the presentation, I'd just like your opinion of what you think this would do, or if it's needed for the department.
what I would tell you is that we are currently following a best practice public education model, so we're getting in the schools the best we can. I would tell you there's a handful of these that I'm aware of across the country that are successful, but they take a lot of partnerships. Would it up our game per se in public education? Sure it would. I think it's investment, and it would take quite a bit of collaboration to make this successful. I think what we're providing is definitely adequate for the community. I don't feel like there's gaps when you look at best practices. If you want us to do it, we'll definitely take it on and do it to the best of our abilities, but I do feel like we're providing best practice public education today in our industry.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I practiced this earlier today with Dan. But it's not very often that a community builds an $18.5 million brand-new fire station from the ground up. It's not too often that a council member travels and so happens to go through a fire safety school in another town. Had no idea when we were going through it what the significance was to that community. And of course, they have a lot of schools because their population is ballooning at a rapid rate. And I'm guessing the Dallas Cowboys might have had something to do with helping finance that one. It's certainly nice to have a very wealthy NFL team and a wealthy owner that built a brand new practice facility, mall, offices, corporate offices in Frisco, Texas. Right. But so the idea is very regional in scope. So, Madam Mayor, to your point, this is not about just Burnsville. It's all South Metro, south of the river, and even South Metro schools that could come through this. I believe the full-time employee that you're recommending is a good recommendation. I think the funding could come through grants that the school system could access through fire safety instruction, even though we might be able to do something like that as well. The partnerships with multiple school districts around, I believe, might even provide more than a single person funding for one full-time FTE. We might be able to get to 2 FTEs, which it could actually take that because the volume of students could be fairly significant throughout the year. But there's a lot left to do, to look at, to research. And I understand that we're on a bit of we've been on a timeline with this. We've been trying to do this new fire station for several years, and finding the property to do it on was a bit of a challenge. And so I'm sure there's some anticipation by the fire department to get this going. I do think this, it is unique. There isn't a lot of these. This is the Frisco, Texas was the first one I'd ever heard of, in a fire station facility type of thing. I do know that when we went through the presentation, it was, very much like being in someone's house and having a disaster, whether it was a fire or a tornado or a storm going on outside. And it's so impactful on these kids that they actually have to ask if any of the children are sensory, sensitive, I guess, to the point where they excuse them and they explain to them in another room what's going on and what's happening. And the kids who are able to go through it actually experience the smoke filling the room and coming down, lowering the roof essentially on them with the sound, the audio effects and such. And then, so I think it's powerful and very important information and a safety course that the kids will probably never forget. I mean, I can imagine this will be the field trip that gets talked about for the rest of their educational lives and beyond. If they're ever caught in some unfortunate situation at home, they'll have the best training that we could ever possibly give them. So I think the power of the concept itself, the regional scope and draw for grade school kids coming from across the river and south of the river and east and west of us is there. I do believe this model could catch on and potentially be an example that other departments, maybe in other areas of the state or upper Midwest region, would come and look at and see. It's a different approach than going in the classroom or a traveling trailer, which the trailer is, I'm guessing a lot of what Lakeville's fire department and community discussed before they ordered that trailer and decided to make that investment and have sort of a traveling mini home where they could create, the environment. I never asked this question. I meant to. If this council were to say, yeah, we want to do this, go forward, what impact does that actually have on the schedule? I mean, where are we at in the processes of designing the actual building?
I get to talk.
Quinn?
Quinn? Question for me?
It's you, Quinn.
It would definitely be something that we would really have to jump on because we are, if we had been on the guiding principles to begin with, we would have been doing it, a month ago. It's trying to program, figure out, and then start planning it in time. So we're behind where we would normally have been addressing it. And, so there is some concern on my side on that, but, we're here to get your direction. So it is certainly something that we'd make happen somehow.
In other words, could you still make this dig in September if this were added? Or is that actually
There's
move us to
some
spring,
risk
as
on
Councilmember
that I would
Schultz?
be concerned about, yeah. I can't say that it's impossible, but it would definitely be a challenge for us to do without some impact. It would probably be something where we're adding a month of time, because we're a month past where we would have been starting with that.
Gotcha.
And work that in.
Danji?
Well, you and I did talk this afternoon, and thank you for that. When you got me kind of excited about it. I'll give you that as well. But when I look at just the timeline, number one, number two, I think if we had been further down the road with this before it came to us, where we knew we had some partnerships in there, where we knew we had other cities that wanted to be involved, kind of like when we built the fire tower over here, and we knew we had everybody together on this one. Then we built the tower, and
Yeah.
it's worked
You
out
mean
well
the
for the
Able
region.
building.
And I think this concept is worth discussion, but I think it's premature right now. Again, I'm with Kara too. I don't want to delay this because I don't want to be sitting here next spring and they say, oh, that's another $2 million, and we just don't need that.
Vince?
Dan, I think it's a cool idea, but I don't know if it makes sense right now. And I don't know if it matches up with the current status of the school district and everything they're going through and grant writing. It seems like there's a lot to do at a time when things are needing to get moved forward. But I do want to ask, given the site and the building that we have with the 18.6, and I know this seldom happens, but if this was something that we looked at in, say, 5 years, and is there room within the site to do a phase two?
Yeah, the challenge I see on it is the hill and the retaining wall aspect of it. If we don't provide room for that addition, the addition would obviously connect to the public side of the fire station. That would push it into the hill further. So the retaining wall built where we show it now was built. It would be a pretty significant tear down and expand and redo. Nothing's impossible, of course, there's always, but there's a cost with those choices too. So it's not something where I'd say that there wouldn't be some difficulty anyway to do it down the road.
Thank you.
Okay.
One more question.
Yeah.
Kind of piggyback on what you're saying. We have other land in town. We have the fire tower. I don't know if there's enough room down there. If we were to build a firehouse down there at some point in the future, should we?
You mean the Able building?
That's it. That's the one. I mean, but we have some places that we could actually build a small structure, because you're not building a real house. I mean, you're not putting the plumbing and the water and everything in there and all that. It's just, it's something we're using for demonstration purposes and for teaching tools.
And we have that collaboration.
Yeah, and then we'd have the collaboration together and all that. So, I mean, I think it's worth us checking around to see if people are interested in being part of something like that. But I think, my sense is it may take a while for that to happen. And you're going to get a while before a bunch of cities want to jump in and say, oh, we'll give you $50,000 for it, or we'll help pay for part of that FTE. But I think if you can get that done, it'd be certainly worth looking at.
Elizabeth, you know the Wilf family pretty well, don't you?
They're
Just say
right
it.
right now.
Yeah.
Just tell 'em,
Yeah.
Jerry wrote a check.
Yeah.
Won't you?
Yeah. So, Dan and I were in Frisco, and we did see this. And it was exciting to see it, and it's a great concept. But as I listened to how they put it together. And it was a separate building from, it was separate from the firehouse and separate from the communications system that they have. That I was more impressed with that than, so this was something that took a while because it took a lot of partners to make it happen. And it was a standalone building, and then they had the little town where the kids had go-karts and bikes and scooters and all of that. And they built a city where the kids would learn how to navigate and drive through the town, learn the signal lights and so forth. But that was done with a lot of partners. And so it is a great concept, but it took a lot of money, and we are on a schedule. I know about cost, and I don't want to see cost escalators because we've delayed. And but it's something, Dan, because if there's room, this building was a separate building. So it wasn't attached to the firehouse. It was a separate building from the firehouse, and it was separate from the communications center that they had in place. I mean, Frisco has a lot of money. We don't. They have a different funding mechanism, but I think it's a great idea. But like the rest of my colleagues, I think we need to move forward, and I don't want the trajectory that we have in place to be slowed down. But it's still something that we can. How many acres did we purchase?
4.4.
And how many acres are we using up now?
4.4.
Other than the hill part that's
Well,
not usable and buildable, you're using the
entire
section.
acreage. Okay. Your idea, I don't know how much land we have over at the Able, but because I know that that retaining wall is going to be a long one, right along, because I know that property very well. So if you're using all 4 acres for this building.
Yeah.
And I just saw your plans, and you had to skinny it back from the retaining wall. Yeah, we need to move forward. Great plan. Maybe we can see how all the other partners, our able partners. And then, I don't know, how many acres do we have down on that property?
That's, if I remember correctly, I don't know that it's easy because it's on the same plat as the water treatment plant, so it's.
No,
or the.
it's not, because it's there, and then there's a school district. And then we're east of the school district, the water treatment plant.
I don't know off the top of my head, but
Yeah, well, Garrett, you're the facilities guy, you better find out how much acreage we own around there.
We'll look
because-
into it, though.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I mean, if that's something, but the other thing is also staging all of the improvements that we have in place with regard to how much, because we have to have the improvements for this building, and then Fire Station 2. And to Kara's point, we have all of the infrastructure stuff that we're looking at, so, yeah. So I think we all agree it's a great idea, but we need to move forward with what we have on our plate. Is that okay?
Who said it was attached to the treatment center?
The same parcel.
No, it's not.
It's on the same parcel, though.
Same parcel.
No.
Dakota County website.
So the water treatment plant is,
Up here. Sorry, we're on TV, so this probably isn't helpful, but
It's helping me.
yeah,
It's about a 13-acre site.
it's a 13.
13 acre
Yeah,
site?
yep,
Okay.
so the water treatment
Yeah.
is on the south side up at the top.
Yeah.
And then,
Is it all connected, Melanie?
The site?
Yeah, is,
Well, yeah, again, not to be helpful for our TV viewers, but it looks like it's a long, site.
So,
Water
yeah,
treatment
it's
plant that's up
elongated.
here, yeah, it's an elongated site. so.
okay. Yeah, so we do have to look in the future, and then so our Able building is Apple Valley, Burnsville, Lakeville, Egan. And, so those are partners, and Savage could be a partner, but I think it's something that where we have to take a look at. So, staff, Melanie and BJ, Garrett, Quinn, and Greg, I think we move forward with what we have. And then we'll have to just take a look and see what the future lies. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you need direction that we haven't given? Okay, great. Good work, you guys. Let's move forward. Let's,
Paint it red.
yeah.
Yeah, paint it red.
Thank you.
Patch it to the barn across the street.
Okay, I think we're going into roundtable, so Michelle, is this yours to schedule the special work session for commission interviews
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We are looking at, typically we have this
in May?
the Tuesday after Memorial Day. But I have been told that that does not work for everybody, so I've asked for everybody to look at their calendars between May 18th and the latest we could possibly go would be May 27th to see if there's an alternative date that would work.
And I am not in state from the 20th until the 26th.
Okay, I did not.
Of May?
May.
So
Okay.
that would leave us with May 18th, 19th, and 27th.
Okay, you just make it work for me.
The 19th is a
Oh,
council
right, the
meeting.
19th is a
I can
council
go the
meeting.
18th or the 27th, either
So
one.
the 18th,
18th is a
27th.
I can-
Monday.
18th, I mean.
I can just do the 18th. I have something going on, unless it's during the day on the 27th.
Well, Kara's just getting in.
Oh, yeah.
She
No,
comes back on the 26th, she said.
So the 18th?
Or the 27th.
18th to the 27th, and I can do day or night, any of them, so.
We typically start around 4:30 or so
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the early end.
Depending
so
on how many applicants we
very
have,
many
we start early, so we can go all the way through.
27th. For me, I got something on the 18th.
The 27th works for you?
Yeah, 27th.
He can't do the evening of the 27th, only day.
It's August last day of school, and they have a program that day.
And you need to be there. You can't miss those.
Yeah,
The 18th then?
I can do the
18th work?
I got, the 18th doesn't work for me. We have an alternative?
We do not.
Earlier?
No, because Kara's going to be gone from the 20th to the
So
26th.
on the 27th, you can't do it during the day, but can you do it, like, what time could you?
It starts at 6:30.
No, he can do it during, he can do it during the day, but not
I
the
can do it
evening.
during the
had
day.
that
I'd have to
reversed.
reschedule with our city
About Thursday,
manager. but-
28th, next day.
So, the council packets will go out on the 28th, and these need to be included in that typically. If we don't get the appointments made by the first meeting in June, then that will push back
Push
when they
yeah.
get trained and when they can start.
What about the
that kind of thing.
15th? That's a Friday.
It's a Friday.
Do you want to do the week of the,
That's National Infrastructure Week. We can't plan anything more.
I can do the 15th.
Look at all the infrastructure we just saw tonight.
We had a whole evening of infrastructure.
I'm out of town.
How about you're out of the 14th?
The 15th.
Yeah, no, but I'm
May,
going to,
so are you.
oh, we are.
what about that Monday, the 11th?
I just need to change my furnace filter.
It's an important task.
It's got to be in the calendar.
The
otherwise I won't
11th,
do
Monday
it.
is good for me.
I can do the
Good.
11th.
Good.
I can do 11th.
Isn't May 11th some major holiday or something? Why is
I'm
it?
sure
We
it's a
can
day
make
or
that work.
something.
It'll be a fast
just
turnaround
sounds
for
like
to get the
Something.
applications in, to get everybody scheduled for the interviews, but I think we could probably do it.
We're doing it?
Okay.
The 11th?
The 11th.
We'll move it.
So I have
Monday,
alliance meeting, you
Monday.
know, just in case we have anything that we need. But then I'll just have Jeff carry that water.
I can't start any earlier than 5. I've got
Oh,
a meeting at
We'll
maybe
get the
4:30.
first couple out of the way without you.
do the Black Dog Watershed Commission first.
Just give me a score, right, how you
Yeah.
scored it.
Well,
We don't know how many we have yet, right?
yeah.
No,
But
right.
we
So it
always
could be
want
a
to.
two-dayer,
So if you're,
or it could be a
if you're an hour
late-nighter.
late, are you okay?
Well,
with-
when are you starting?
Well,
It would
for
depend on how many
many
applicants.
applicants, usually around 4.
Do you know how many
Yes.
openings we have?
Not off the top of my head. I haven't.
might
But
help.
every-
that.
but
The
every
actual
commission-
recruiting for the commission.
Sure.
Reserve 4 to 9 or 10, and then we can just start maybe at 5 if we don't end up with as many.
Sure. We have, we will start the recruitment process, usually starts around the 1st of April, and so the week before that, I will find out exactly how many positions we have open and get them all posted out there.
Okay? Okay, we got something. We got something. Okay, very good. Okay, reports, Vince?
I don't believe I have anything to report on at the moment. Again.
Dan?
My commissions met last month. The DBB is tomorrow afternoon, and the CVB is next week.
And Vince, you're gonna be there tomorrow afternoon? I think you'd said at the all-day that you wanted to be there.
He wants to
Keep an eye
see
on
my
it.
magic there at the DBB.
Keep an eye on Dan. What time is it?
Okay.
Well, it's 4 for the rest of it, but 4:30 for you.
In
Kara?
St. Paul.
DCC hasn't met again yet, and Parks is coming up, so.
Okay. Dan?
I-35 is meeting this week. One of the biggest issues I've been bringing up and that we're working on, I had a meeting with Commissioner Workman on is, and Ryan's working on this because of our bike riding community is looking for a solution to the flood problem for the trail. Crossing our big, beautiful, multi-million-dollar I-35 bridge, which won't happen unless you're in a car if there's a flood. And so we're gonna spend more time on that in a future meeting.
The Greenway is
regional-
also still, is it still flooded? The Greenway? Okay,
We're gonna invite the Hennepin County Park and Trail person and have our Dakota County and do a dual presentation of the master plan of the trails and how they interconnect and shine a spotlight on the error of MnDOT's ways of not making that on and off ramp accessible during a flood. That doesn't mitigate Black Dog Trail. That would be coming down the frontage road, I guess if you call it that, to the I-35 going north. You'd be able to continue on over. You may not be able to go down and get on Black Dog if there's a flood event. So the other part of that is what Ryan and I think City Manager Lee could comment on is we're beginning the process of talking to various agencies to muster up the support and the money and whatever it takes to consider raising the Black Dog Trail above floodplain so it can be used, given that our 100-year flood comes around every other year, or 2 out of every 3 years, it seems. And it's a great trail. It's beautiful when it opened
It
up, and it's
always
been a disappointment
floods.
because it floods like every year.
Every
Like
year.
This past summer,
it
it
flooded
flooded
almost
for
the whole,
so much the entire season that people
was
didn't even
almost
try to
flooded
go
the
down there.
whole
It was
time.
basically a write-off. I mean, you couldn't even use it. So, very unfortunate. But
Yeah.
it's going to be an expensive deal to raise it above flood. But at the very least, we need to be addressing the crossing of the bridge and the access points to do that for everybody that's not driving a car.
is that it?
Yeah, MBTA board's coming up next week. It's the Driver of the Year celebration, and we're meeting out at the Horse and Hunt Club, which is a first. I've never.
You usually
heard of
go to
that, but-
Cherokee.
Never
Yeah.
heard of that?
Yeah, we did the
like-
Cherokee for the holiday party. It's gonna be Horse and Hunt for the Driver of the Year and board meeting, so looking forward to that.
It's fun down there.
But nothing major. I mean, everything's getting ready for the legislative session, and I'm really enjoying the National League of Cities Transportation Infrastructure Services Federal Advocacy Committee because they're anxious to hear about everything we got going on that might involve federal dollars. So tonight's presentation gave me some fodder to take to the next conference call, which is this next week.
Okay. The Burnsville Community Foundation is reviewing, it's coming up, but the last meeting had to do with reviewing the winter lighting. And there was a suggestion that perhaps we don't light all the trees. And I'm thinking, oh no, you can't go down that road. So we're going to be having, that's going to be an item on this Burnsville Community Foundation. And Garrett did share with them what the city's contribution is and what the Burnsville Community Foundation raises for the winter lighting. I did share with them that one of the things that you wanted to do was to see if we can light up all year. We said we didn't get anywhere because we need to bury those electrical lines. And so I will report to them that we did talk about it at the all-day work session, if we use deed grant to see if we can bury all of that electrical lines, but how much it's going to be. But then, you know, it's all prioritization with the economic development projects. So anyway.
Phased in over a number of years, probably, right? Probably not going to bury it all in one
well,
season.
Well, and we've got that for an upcoming work session topic, Madam Mayor and
Yeah.
Council, so we'll have some more information on it.
So, you know, I'll report more on that. But the thing is, they need to understand that it's not just them, it's a partnership with us, with those winter lights.
Yes.
Yeah. So they can't make a decision about what's going to be lit and what isn't going to be lit, because we are a partner in that contribution. So that's that. And then our Burnsville Savage meeting that we had, Melanie, was mostly about reporting. And one of the things that they were interested in was our sustainability plan, because they don't have one and they're going to begin to look at that and see how that all works. And then the other thing was fees.
And we talked a lot about just kind of homelessness and
Yeah.
some of those
Yeah.
quality of life issues that we all seem to be facing.
Yeah. So those were some of the items that we discussed at the Burnsville Savage meeting. And then International Festival, we're on our way. Yeah, so now we're ready to raise money, but we're meeting. Our meetings have started. So that's it. Michelle, you have anything else?
Nothing, Madam.
Greg?
No, Madam Mayor.
Melanie?
No, Madam Mayor.
We stand adjourned by acclamation.
In under 3 hours.